At sunrise, a scream shattered the quiet of Silver Ridge Meadows, and what Dorothy witnessed from her window ignited an unexpected firestorm. Rex, a scarred rescue German shepherd, leapt the fence with something in his mouth, and neighbors assumed the worst. Accusations flew. A family dog labeled a thief. But hidden behind that garage door was a truth no one was ready to face, a truth that would reveal not only betrayal, but profound sacrifice. Rex wasn't stealing life. He was actually saving it. And what did he uncover? It changed everything. When Dorothy Miller's scream broke the stillness of Silver Ridge Meadows at dawn, she saw something unbelievable through her kitchen window. Rex, the German shepherd of the Harper family, was jumping their backyard fence with something hanging from his mouth. It was not a small, whimpering puppy, but rather someone stealing their baby. Dorothy called out to the neighborhood watch. And a few minutes later, Daniel Harper was surrounded on his front lawn by neighbors wearing bathrobes and slippers, their faces contorted. They accused him and pointed fingers at his cherished rescue dog, which was now huddled protectively in the corner of their garage. Bob Whitaker snarled, his face flushed with rage. First, Emma vanished, and now it's time to put this beast down? What none of them realized yet was that Rex was not the antagonist of this tale. The real monster wore human skin and a warm smile. Behind the garage door, 5 small German shepherd puppies nestled against Rex's warm body, their lives saved by an act that the humans mistook for theft. Silver Ridge Meadows is located on the northeastern edge of Sierra Vista, New Mexico. The weatherman declared it the hottest June on record, with temperatures exceeding 180 degrees for 16 days in a row. To save water, the neighborhood association had long ago required desert landscaping in place of lush lawns and ornamental rock gardens. The Harper and Whitaker families shared a property line, but had little else in common. Daniel Harper, a high school history teacher with salt and pepper hair and permanent smile lines, had brought his family here 3 years ago in search of affordable suburban peace. His wife, Sarah, a pediatric nurse with soft hands and a steely resolve, worked night shifts at Banner Desert Medical Center. Their 14-year-old daughter, Emma, had the compassion of her mother and the thoughtfulness of her father in abundance toward animals. 2 years ago, after Emma's persistent pleas, the Harpers adopted Rex from Desert Paws Rescue. Rex was not your typical German shepherd. At 6 years old, his muzzle had just started to turn silver, and a jagged scar ran across his left flank, which was a reminder of his past life as Officer James Cooper's canine partner. When Cooper was killed in a convenience store shooting, Rex sustained both physical and emotional injuries, and the shelter warned the Harpers that Rex might never fully adapt to civilian life. "He just needs someone to believe in him again," Emma had said. The Whitaker family next door put on a glossier front. Victor Whitaker made his fortune by flipping distressed properties during the housing crash. His wife, Vanessa, had a popular social media account that showed off their real-life luxury lifestyle, but her followers never saw what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Their son, Caleb, a high school baseball star with aspirations to be a college football star, inherited his parents' charm and their casual disregard for anything that did not further his goals. In between these two homes lived Maggie, a 72-year-old widow whose wire-rimmed glasses and sensible shoes belied her sharp mind and sharper tongue. Vanessa had bought the Whitakers' German shepherd, Bella, on a whim after seeing a celebrity pose with the same breed in a magazine. At the age of 2, Bella's shiny coat and aristocratic bearing made her the ideal prop for Vanessa's poolside photo shoots until her unplanned pregnancy ruined her camera-ready figure. The problem started on a Tuesday when Bella's labor started unexpectedly next to the Whitakers' pool. Vanessa had been hosting her monthly mimosas and mindfulness gathering for her social media followers when Bella's whimpering interrupted her live stream. The camera caught Vanessa's brief moment of annoyance before she recovered with practiced concern. Maggie had spent 30 years training military dogs before retiring to watch the world from her porch swing, missing nothing. "Bob!" Vanessa's facade collapsed as soon as the camera stopped running and her guests left. "Nature is so lovely, is it not, blessed hatchdog mama?" she said, quickly arranging herself for a nice shot with the laboring puppy in the backdrop. Bob Whitaker came out of his home office, his tanned face displaying annoyance. "Just leave her," she yelled toward the house. "The dog is making a mess on the travertine. Dogs have been delivering puppies without human assistance for thousands of years." He looked at his Rolex. "I have a conference call with investors in 10 minutes. Can you handle this? I am not touching that situation," Vanessa said, wrinkled her nose, and called the gardener or something. By dusk, Bella had given birth to 6 puppies without human help, exhausted and dehydrated in the 108-degree heat. She lay panting on the concrete, her maternal instincts fighting her physical depletion. Rex watched with increasing agitation as he paced back and forth along the property line, his ears perking forward at each tiny yelp. "Well, would you look at that? Bella's had her puppies," Daniel Harper asked, following Rex's gaze through the fence's slats. He caught a glimpse of Bella surrounded by wriggling bundles and called over his shoulder, "Emma, come see!" Emma hurried to the fence, her eyes wide with excitement. "Oh my gosh, puppies! They are so tiny!" As she noticed Bella's anguish, her smile wavered. "Dad, Eleanor Richardson, a former military dog trainer, stood at her kitchen window with binoculars trained on the Whitakers' backyard. She recognized a distressed dog when she saw one. Bella's labored breathing and the dispersed placement of the puppies too far from their mother's warmth set off alarms in Eleanor's seasoned mind. "Bella does not look good," Thomas said, scowling. He noted Bella's heaving sides and the puppy's increasingly frantic movements. "Maybe they have not noticed?" Emma asked incredulously. By nightfall, Bella's condition had gotten worse. The Whiters had moved her and the puppies to a plastic kiddie pool in the corner of their yard with a bowl of water and some kibble. But Bella, who was inexperienced and overwhelmed, found it difficult to keep her puppies organized. She would nudge one back only to have another crawl away. "Fools," she muttered, reaching for her phone, when she saw Vanessa stepping over the puppies to position a picture of iced tea for a photo. "Those puppies need proper care. Bella's a first-time mother in dangerous heat. Bob says they have called their vet." Thomas replied, though his tone suggested doubt. "Those puppies need proper care." Clara Harper said, joining her husband by the fence after returning from her hospital shift. "I don't like this." Rex had not settled all evening, refusing dinner and ignoring Emma's attempts to persuade him inside while keeping his watchful position along the fence. At one point, he started digging with his powerful paws, sending dirt flying until Thomas firmly called him away. Sarah's medical background made her doubtful when she said, "They will take them in tomorrow for a checkup." "Those puppies will not make it through the night if they are not kept warm and hydrated. Newborns cannot regulate their body temperature." Rex, as if he understood her, pressed his nose against the fence at 2 a.m. Rex, whose keen senses picked up the weakening cries from next door, was the only one awake in the Harper household. The others were dispersed around the pool, their tiny bodies cooling in the desert night air, which was dangerously cold for newborns but mild to humans. Rex made his decision with calculated precision, pushing against the loose board in the fence that Thomas had been meaning to fix. It gave way just enough for him to squeeze through silent as a shadow as he approached the kiddie pool. Bella. She raised her head feebly, recognizing Rex from their fence line encounters. Rather than displaying the territorial aggression one might anticipate, she whimpered softly, a mother's cry for assistance. With soft jaws, Rex lifted the weakest puppy alive, the one that was farthest from Bella's warmth, and carried it with the same delicate precision he had once used to rescue survivors from earthquake debris. He went back to the fence, negotiated the opening, and carried his priceless cargo to the Harper garage, where an old dog bed awaited them one by one. By the time Dorothy Miller saw him on his last journey at sunrise, Rex had almost finished his mission of mercy, a mission that humans, with their limited knowledge, would call theft, after saving 4 more puppies through the dark hours before dawn, leaving only the strongest one curled against Bella's side. "You need to control that animal, Harper," Dorothy Miller said. Bob Whitaker thundered his finger, jabbing the air toward Thomas's chest. Dorothy Miller's frantic calls about a dog napping in progress had drawn a crowd to the Harpers' front lawn. "That beast has stolen 5 of our purebred puppies. Do you have any idea what they are worth?" Thomas resisted, even though his face was pale. "Rex, would not hurt those puppies, Bob. There must be some explanation." "Your rescue mutt is dangerous," Bob said, carrying his voice for the benefit of the onlookers. "Those dogs are registered German shepherds with championship bloodlines, and now Rex is stealing our property." Clara Harper stepped forward, her nurse's scrub still on from her night shift. "Bob, we don't know either, but Rex is nice and has never harmed an animal. Tell Bella that Vanessa Whitaker started recording the altercation on her phone. She is inconsolable, a mother separated from her children, Lily Harper hovering at the edge of the confrontation. But that is untrue." Bob's face darkened, and the damage was irreparable. "Are you accusing us of neglect, young lady? That is a serious allegation." "Where are the puppies now?" Officer Martinez asked, having arrived in response to Bob's 911 call. Although his weathered face remained professionally neutral, his eyes narrowed slightly in response to the rising tensions. "Bella is in our garage," Sarah admitted, "but I saw her yesterday. You left her outside all day in the heat with the puppies scattered everywhere. Emma Thomas warned her not to take care of them. The group was heading toward the Harper's garage when they failed to notice Maggie watching from her driveway with her old flip phone, surreptitiously recording everything they said." Inside the garage, Rex was curled up protectively around 5 small puppies, making his body a warm haven. When the door opened, he raised his head, but did not move to run away or act aggressively. Instead, his eyes seemed to beg for understanding. Officer Martinez knelt next to the makeshift nest, demonstrating his knowledge of animal care. "That is not what it looks like to me," the officer said in a measured tone. "I have seen neglected animals before, Mrs. Whitaker. These pups show signs of dehydration and possibly hypothermia, which did not develop in the last hour. He also noted that these pups are in rough shape and that he gently examined the smallest one. They need veterinary attention immediately," Vanessa insisted, but she kept her distance from the puppies because she was more concerned with taking pictures with her phone. "He is bringing them to you for help," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. The moment changed the energy in the room. Even some of the neighbors who had been firmly on the Whitakers' side exchanged troubled glances. "I want those puppies returned to our property immediately," Bob demanded, but with less conviction. "And I want an examination of all the animals first," Officer Martinez retorted. The moment changed the energy in the room. As the argument went on, Rex retreated to a corner of the garage, seemingly defeated by the human's incapacity to comprehend. "Emma, what is that?" Thomas asked Emma to open her palm, revealing a small, worn leather item, a police badge, that was tangled in Rex's collar. "I discovered it this morning while I was checking on him and the puppies." Thomas took the badge, turned it over, and read the inscription K9 Unit Officer. The most decorated search and rescue team in the department's history, James Cooper and his partner Rex, pulled 20 people from collapsed buildings following the Grand Avenue gas explosion 5 years ago. The group fell silent, and all eyes turned to the elderly woman. James Cooper. Sarah repeated, her brow furrowing. Why does that name sound familiar? Every canine officer in Phoenix knows it came from a new voice. Maggie stood in the garage doorway, her slight frame commanding unexpected attention. For the first time, doubt crossed Bob Whitaker's face. That is convenient, he sneered, but his bluster had subsided. How do you know that, Mrs. Richardson, Officer Martinez? Because I trained them, Maggie said simply. Before I spent 30 years working with military and police K-9 programs, I trained Rex, who is not just any dog. Rex received specific training to locate and rescue victims in distress. What you are seeing is not theft. It is a rescue operation. She turned to face the group and said, This dog, running her gnarled hand along his scarred flank, lost everything when Cooper was killed in the line of duty as handler, his purpose, his home, yet his instincts remain intact. Last night, she said, I watched from my window as Bella struggled with her puppies. I saw Vanessa step over them to take pictures for her Instagram. I saw Bob ignore his wife when she called for help. I saw these puppies scattered and crying, while their mother grew too weak to care for them. You spy on us, old woman Bob. Officer Martinez turned to the Whiters and said, I think we need to check on Bella and the remaining puppy, in a tone that left no room for disagreement. And then we are all going to we were having a conversation about animal welfare laws in Maricopa County, he said, as the group filed out toward the Whitaker residence. Emma hung back, kneeling beside Rex, as the group filed out toward the Whitaker residence. I think we need to check on Bella and the remaining puppy, he said, reshaping everyone's perception of the situation. The procession to the Whitakers' backyard revealed a scene far worse than anyone had expected. Bella lay listlessly in the plastic kiddie pool, her once glossy coat now dull and matted. The single remaining puppy squirmed weakly against her side, its cries barely audible. Rex's amber eyes met hers with an intelligence that transcended species, the look of a soul that had seen both the worst and the best of humanity and still chosen to serve. We were a hero all along, she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. This dog needs immediate medical attention, said Officer Martinez, muttering as he dropped to one knee next to the struggling animal. Nearby it was empty, tipped over, and baked dry by the morning sun. Jesus Christ. Vanessa Whitaker hung back her manicured hand, covering her mouth in what looked like shock, but her phone was still in place to record the dramatic scene. We had no idea, she stammered. Bella seemed fine yesterday. The neighbors, who had initially been prepared to condemn Rex, now shifted uneasily as they witnessed the neglect firsthand. Dorothy Miller, who had raised the first alarm about Rex, looked particularly shocked. I do not understand, she whispered to Eleanor. This dog is severely dehydrated and likely suffering from heat exhaustion. Her milk production has probably stopped entirely. This little one is critical too. Clara Harper's medical training took precedence over her natural diplomacy. Eleanor's weathered face remained impassive. They take such excellent care of their pets. Their yard is immaculate, and Bella always looks so beautiful in Vanessa's photos. Looks can be misleading, Dorothy. I have been watching Bella's condition deteriorate ever since the Whitakers got her beautiful coat. Indeed, treating a dog like a lawn ornament is inappropriate. More often than not, they have left her outside in this heat. Officer Martinez had already radioed for animal control support. He stood up and fixed Bob Whitaker with a fierce stare. When was the last time Bella got food or water, Mr. Whitaker? Bob tugged at his collar, and his perspiration on his forehead had nothing to do with the morning heat. Vanessa looks after the dogs. I have been occupied with a big development deal. Yesterday afternoon I gave her more food because she is nursing. But that is not what I saw. I watched from my kitchen window as you took pictures of Bella and the puppies for at least half an hour. Then went inside when your phone rang, and you never returned. Vanessa's composed face faltered as she asked, Are you spying on me? That is harassment. No, that is neighborhood watch. Maggie responded calmly. Been doing it for 30 years, got a logbook and everything. She gave a meaningful pat on her pocket. Daniel Harper, who had been looking over the backyard with growing concern, called out from close to the garden shed, "Officer, you might want to see this." Martinez escorted him to a partially hidden stack of brand-new wire crates, still adorned with price tags. Thomas wrote, "6 crates," and Bob stepped forward quickly. "Those are for transporting them to the vet," he explained, though his eyes darted nervously. "Responsible breeding practices?" Martinez did not seem convinced. "When exactly were you planning to take these puppies to the vet, Mr. Whitaker? They are barely 24 hours old, and it appears that no preparations have been made." Emma had slipped back to the Harper house, while the adults were still having a heated argument. She returned with a small cooler and, kneeling next to Bella, carefully offered a syringe of water to the weak mother dog. "Easy, girl," she whispered. "Small sips." Bella's tired eyes were fixed on Emma with desperate trust. She accepted the water, and then licked the girl's hand weakly. "She is burning up," Emma called out, her voice breaking with emotion. "We need to cool her down," Emma said. Within minutes, the Harpers' yard had become an impromptu veterinary triage center. Neighbors who had arrived as accusers now shuttled supplies. Beverly Wilson from across the street brought clean towels. Mike Jefferson, a retired paramedic, assisted Sarah in assessing Bella's vital signs. Even Dorothy Miller filled her gardening watering can to monitor her temperature. Sarah was already moving, saying, "Veterinary emergency training from her nursing rotations taking over. We need wet towels, a fan, and more water." "The animal ambulance is on its way," said Officer Martinez as he returned from his patrol car. "They will transport Bella and the remaining puppy to the emergency animal hospital on Camelback." The Whiters stood apart, Bob checking his watch repeatedly, and Vanessa's social media performance had abruptly stopped, her phone now clutched tightly against her chest. "How are our other puppies doing?" "Those puppies are evidence in a possible animal neglect case, Mr. Whitaker. For now, they remain with the Harpers, who appear to be the only ones giving them the proper care." "This is absurd," Bob spluttered. "Those are purebred German shepherds worth thousands each. You cannot simply cut him off like that," Bob demanded, pointing to the Harper home. "We want them returned immediately." Martinez's expression hardened. Citing probable cause, Rex showed up at the fence's opening, his perceptive eyes focused on Bella, and to everyone's amazement, Bella's tail made a weak wag of recognition. "Would you look at that? She knows who saved her babies," Maggie whispered. As 2 veterinary technicians quickly assessed Bella and the puppy, they exchanged worried glances. The lead technician nodded grimly. The puppies were severely dehydrated, and the mothers were exhibiting symptoms of mastitis. "We will do everything we can." As they carefully loaded Bella and her remaining puppy into the ambulance, Emma approached, tears streaming down her face, and asked, "Can we bring the other puppies they need there?" Emma said, "I have bottle-fed orphaned puppies at the rescue." Sarah nodded in agreement. "We will take full responsibility for them. Now wait just a minute." Bob interrupted. "Those are our puppies. If they need special care, we will hire someone." Martinez stepped between them. "Mr. Whitaker, I have already explained the situation. Normally, yes, but in this case, the mother's milk has probably dried up from dehydration. The puppies would be better off bottle-fed for the time being." Eleanor Richardson's voice was pitched just for him as the ambulance drove away. "You might want to check Bob Whitaker's phone records, especially his texts from the previous week. I have reason to think that those crates were not meant for veterinary visits." Martinez's eyebrows went up. "Care to elaborate, ma'am?" Eleanor's weathered face hardened. 2 days ago, I was passing his car when he was on the phone. His window was down, and his air conditioner was running. Typical Bob wasting energy, I could clearly hear him. He had 6 purebred German Shepherd puppies ready for pickup next. Along with my logbook detailing Bella's condition for the previous 3 months back at the Harper home, Emma had turned the garage into a makeshift puppy nursery. Thomas brought down the space the heater from the attic was used to maintain a steady temperature, while Sarah prepared the formula. Week 7,000 cash, no paperwork, and no questions did not sound like a conversation with a veterinarian to me, but Martinez's expression darkened. That would explain a lot. Summer vacation had its benefits for a teacher, and Rex had not left the puppy's side since they returned from the confrontation. He lay curled around them, his body providing warmth and comfort, his tongue occasionally bathing them as Sarah explained, "They will need feeding round the clock for at least the next 2 weeks, using the emergency puppy kit Emma had put together months ago for her rescue volunteer work." The Harper family worked in shifts for the next 3 days, sleeping when they could in between puppy feedings. Rex stayed alert, alerting them with a gentle whine whenever a puppy appeared distressed. His prior training became increasingly evident as he anticipated problems before they occurred. A mother would approach with the first bottle, and he watched attentively, seemingly understanding the process. "You are amazing, Rex," Emma whispered, stroking his scarred muzzle. During her house call to check on the puppy's progress, Dr. Patel noticed that Rex was essentially acting as their surrogate mother, exhibiting behaviors he would have been trained to recognize during search and rescue operations. "Is that common?" Thomas asked, watching Rex gently nudge a wandering puppy back into the nest. "No," Dr. Patel said. The puppy had rolled onto its stomach, back to its side, to prevent aspiration, stimulating them after feedings to encourage elimination, and maintaining constant body contact to regulate their temperature. The implications hung in the air as Sarah expressed what they were all thinking. The Whitakers will still try to reclaim them legally because they are still the Whitakers' property. She hesitated, then added, "I just came from examining Bella at the emergency hospital. She is stabilized, but her recovery will be slow. Her mastitis is severe, and she is extremely malnourished. Even if she recovers fully, she may never be able to nurse these puppies. However, given the circumstances, Animal Control has the right to place the puppies in protective custody until the investigation concludes." She gave a small smile, and based on what I have heard, Officer Martinez is conducting an incredibly thorough investigation. The news quickly spread throughout Silver Ridge Meadows, and by the 4th day, the story had changed from Harper's dangerous dog-stealing puppies to hero police dog rescues neglecting puppies. Neighbors who had previously condemned Rex now stopped by with supplies for the puppies and treats for their savior. Dorothy Miller apologized with tears and brought a handmade dog bed. She had spent the entire night sewing, so I assumed the worst when she saw a large dog with a puppy. Thomas accepted her gift, but he has always been kind. Maggie had been telling us about his past. Dorothy asked, "Is it true that he pulled a child from a burning building?" Thomas grinned, citing his service record, which showed that he had actually had 3 children. The mayor commended him and Officer Cooper, but the conversation was cut short when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up. Bob Whitaker came out of it looking much less confident than he had a few days before, his designer polo shirt rumpled and his eyes shadowed by dark circles. "Harper," he called as he approached the front door. "We need to talk." "What can I do for you, Bob?" Thomas asked, purposefully shutting the door behind him as he stepped onto the porch. When Dorothy did not move to leave, Whitaker looked at her. "Privately," he insisted. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my neighbors," Thomas said evenly. "We do not have secrets in this household," Bob said. "Fine, I want to make a deal about the puppies." "There is no deal to make," he said. "Look, we've overreached. Vanessa is not really a dog person, and I have been swamped with work," Bob said, lowering his voice. I acknowledge that you made mistakes with Bella, but those puppies are valuable purebreds, so I am willing to pay you $500 for your carry, and we will forget about the fence damage issue." "Fence damage," Thomas repeated incredulously. "This is not about money or fences. It is about animal welfare and $16,000, Bob said abruptly. "Cash today for all 5 puppies." The offer hung in the air, and you could feel the desperation. "Why is this event so important to you?" I asked quietly. "Just a few days ago, you struggled to provide basic care for these animals, and now you're offering thousands of dollars." Before Bob could respond, a police cruiser pulled up behind his SUV. Officer Martinez and another plainclothes officer, Whitaker, got out. Detective Wilson of the Phoenix PD called over to Officer Whitaker, and blood began to run down Bob's face. Without saying anything more to Thomas, he turned and strode quickly toward the officers, already reaching for his cell phone. "Who is Michael Ferraro?" "I do not know," Dorothy muttered to Thomas. Observing the heated exchange at the curb, Thomas responded. From inside the house, Rex's distinctive bark sounded not his alarm bark, but the 3 sharp sounds that the Harper had come to recognize as his alert that a puppy needed attention. Duty calls. Thomas excused himself and left the drama playing out on his front lawn, rejoining his family in the garage-turned-nursery. There, he discovered Emma laughing as the smallest puppy repeatedly tumbled into Rex's patient form while trying to stand on wobbly legs. "Dad, look, Peanut is trying to walk," Thomas said, re-joking. Rex looked up at Thomas, his bright eyes seeming to convey both pride in his charges and determination to defend them. In that moment, Thomas made a silent promise to the dog who had already lost one family. Rex would not lose another. The Phoenix summer intensified into what meteorologists were calling a heat dome. Thomas felt a wave of affection as he watched his daughter and their extraordinary dog care for these vulnerable creatures, regardless of the legal battles that lay ahead or the Whitakers' mysterious agenda. By the 7th day of the puppy saga, temperatures in Maricopa County reached a record-breaking 118 degrees. Power companies warned of possible rolling blackouts due to the overwhelming demand for air conditioning, and residents of Silver Ridge Meadows were advised to limit their outdoor activities and keep an eye on their neighbors who were at risk. For the Harper family, the crisis added to their already demanding puppy care schedule, and Thomas installed backup battery systems. "Your daughter has a future in veterinary medicine. If we survive the next few weeks," said the elderly woman, looking over Emma's handwritten protocols. "Your daughter has a future in veterinary medicine." "If we survive the next few weeks," Sarah said with a weary smile. Sarah had been working. She worked night shifts at the hospital and took day rotations with the puppies, unwilling to risk even a moment's power outage for the fragile animals, so she stocked ice and extra water. Rex continued his surrogate parenting with unparalleled dedication, seemingly impervious to exhaustion. On the 8th day, as the heatwave peaked, Detective Wilson returned to the Harper home with Officer Martinez and a representative from County Animal Control. The puppies, now a week old, were making promising progress. Their eyes remained sealed, but their bodies had plumped with proper nutrition, and their cries had strengthened into demanding squeals during feeding times. Their expressions were solemn as Thomas invited them into the air-conditioned living room. "Mr. Harper," Detective Wilson started, "I would like to give you an update on our investigation into the Whitaker situation. What I am going to share is confidential, but since you are the current custodians of the animals involved, you have a right to know." Thomas nodded, calling Sarah and Emma from the garage to join them. "We have a warrant for Whitaker's electronic communications," Wilson added, after everyone had taken a seat. "What we discovered supports our suspicions that Whitaker was negotiating the sale of the German Shepherd puppies to Michael Ferraro, a well-known dog organizer. German Shepherds are not usually bred for fighting, but their intelligence and trainability make them valuable as bait dogs used to train fighting breeds. Ferraro's operation has been diversifying into guard dogs for illegal operations and drug houses. Emma's face went pale. They were going to use them as bait. That is evil. It gets worse, Martinez added. Fighting rings in the southwest. Sarah gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, and Wilson nodded grimly. This data shows that Whitaker owes Ferraro a large gambling debt, which explains why he was so anxious to retrieve the puppies. The news washed over the room, and Rex, who had followed the family inside, stood alert by Emma's side, his ears perking up as though he understood the seriousness of the situation. "What happens now?" Thomas finally asked. "Whitaker faces arrest on conspiracy charges of animal cruelty and illegal gambling." Wilson clarified that his wife, Vanessa, was unaware of the agreement, despite our inquiry. As for the puppies and Bella, a sharp knock stopped him. Elelena Richardson stood at the open doorway, her thin frame vibrating with urgency. "The Whitaker house is on fire," she said without hesitation. Everyone rushed outside to see thick black smoke billowing from the Whitaker residence. 2 fire trucks were already on the scene. Firefighters were unspooling hoses, and neighbors were gathered at a safe distance. Vanessa was home alone. Dorothy Miller sobbed when she saw the Harper, and they took Bob away in handcuffs this morning. Rex barked sharply before anybody could react, then ran toward the fence line and vanished through the now familiar loose board. "Rex!" After he grabbed her arm, Emma cried, "But Bella's still in their backyard," protesting with tears in her eyes. "She cannot escape." "Stay here. The firefighters will handle it," Emma said. She was released from emergency care to home recovery. Yesterday, deemed stable enough to leave the hospital, but still too weak to be separated from her remaining puppy. Sarah gasped when Vanessa said they were keeping Bella in the air-conditioned storage shed while she recovered. Martinez told the fire crew on his radio that the animals might be stuck in the yard, but they were busy. The realization dawned on them all simultaneously. Rex reappeared at the fence line, barking frantically toward the Harpers before vanishing again toward the Whitakers' backyard. "He is trying to tell us something," Emma insisted. "Dad," Maggie said grimly, "the power has been fluctuating all day." Maggie said that if they left Bella in that shed with only a portable AC unit, she did not need to finish the thought. In this heat, with rolling blackouts, the shed would turn into a deadly oven within minutes of losing power. "We must assist." Thomas looked at Officer Martinez, who nodded curtly and unclipped his utility belt. "Stay behind me," Martinez said, ordering them to move toward the fence with Thomas close behind. They discovered Rex scratching frantically at the padlocked shed door. Through the small window, they could see Bella lying still on her side, the small puppy next to her equally still. The interior of the shed was clearly sweltering, with condensation fogging the window from the intense heat trapped inside. The sound was partially muffled by the confusion of the firefighting at the front of the house, but when the door opened, a blast of superheated air escaped, and Bella remained motionless, even when Rex rushed to her side and nudged her with his nose. "She is still breathing," Thomas declared, dropping to his knees next to the mother dog and barely managing to gather the limp puppy that gave no resistance. "This little one's in bad shape, too." Martinez said, "We need to cool them down immediately." He had already taken off his uniform shirt to soak it in the nearby bird bath. Together they worked quickly to wrap Bella in the wet fabric while Thomas held the puppy against his less heated skin. Rex paced tensely between them, wailing in distress. "We need to get them out of here," Thomas urged, glancing at the raging fire. "The fence is our best exit." When they arrived at the Harpers' driveway, Sarah had already set up their garage as a cooling station, with fans placed strategically and cool, wet towels ready. Their core temperatures are dangerously high, so she evaluated her nurse's training, which was evident in her effective movements. Martinez nodded carefully, lifting Bella's dead weight. You go first with the pup, and I will hand Bella over to you. The transfer over the fence was awkward but successful, with Rex somehow understanding the process and waiting until Bella was safely across before squeezing through his access point. Please bring the digital thermometer and cooling packs from my emergency kit. Over the course of the following hour, Harper and Martinez worked together to gradually lower Bella's and her puppy's temperatures, using methods Sarah had learned from treating people who had suffered from heat stroke. Rex never left Bella's side, his body pressed against hers as if lending her his strength, and he occasionally licked her face in apparent encouragement. "Come on, girl," Emma whispered, her young face strewn with tears and perspiration. "Do not give up. Your babies need you," Emma said, her young face trembling with tears and perspiration. Outside the Whitaker house, the emergency response continued, with Thomas periodically stepping out for updates and returning with grim reports. "The fire marshal thinks it started in the kitchen," he told them after one such reconnaissance. "Vanessa claimed she left something on the stove when she got a phone call." Bella's eyes flickered open, focusing hazily on Rex for a brief moment before closing again. "That is a good sign," Sarah encouraged. "Convenient timing," Elena said dryly from her perch on a garage stool. She had designated herself as an auxiliary nurse, making cool towels and keeping an eye on the other puppies, who were blissfully oblivious to the drama surrounding their mother. By late afternoon, the immediate crisis had passed. The Whitaker house fire was contained, despite the fact that the structure had sustained significant damage. Bella's temperature had returned to normal, and she had taken small amounts of water, but she was still too weak to nurse her returned puppy. Dr. Patel arrived, summoned by Sarah's urgent call, and examined Bella and the rescued puppy thoroughly. She concluded soberly that Bella had suffered thermal injuries and that the puppy was exhibiting signs of respiratory distress due to the superheated air, and that Bella's paw pads were burned from the shed's hot floor. She looked up at the worried faces around her, and she concluded, "They need intensive care, but I am cautiously optimistic if you had not reached them when you did." The unfinished sentence hung in the air, and everyone's eyes turned to Rex, who remained in his protective position next to Bella. "He knew," Emma said simply. "He knew she was." When Detective Wilson arrived, his expression was a mix of satisfaction and rage. "Vanessa Whitaker has been arrested," he declared without preamble, "and not for the fire." "What happened?" Thomas asked. "In danger," Dr. Patel nodded. His training as a search and rescue dog included detecting victims in buildings with extreme heat or structural damage. Those instincts never leave them. She patted Rex's head with respect. "He is quite extraordinary." As fire investigators went inside, they found a secret room behind the pantry. There, they found dozens of betting slips, almost $75,000 in cash, and records of dogfighting operations going back 3 years. Wilson shook his head in disgust. It turned out that Vanessa was not just aware of Bob's activities. She was also the bookkeeper for Ferraro's entire operation in the valley. "My God," Thomas breathed. "So the fire was probably an attempt to destroy evidence." Wilson confirmed that she did not count on the safe being fireproof, or us already having digital equipment. "What happens to Bella and the puppies now legally, they are considered evidence in an animal cruelty case," Wilson explained, looking back at the garage where her family was still caring for the rescued dogs. "However, considering the situation and your family's evident commitment, Animal Control is willing to grant you emergency fostering status for all of them while the case is pending. After that, assuming convictions, you would have the first option to adopt." This possibility sent a wave of conflicting emotions through Thomas, exhausting and costly. Their home was not really large enough. Their lives had been completely turned upside down. But after seeing Emma's tender care, Sarah's unwavering dedication, and Rex's extraordinary devotion. Could he really imagine giving these animals up to anyone else? As if he could sense his thoughts, Rex appeared in the garage doorway, his bright eyes fixed on Thomas with an expression that seemed to ask a question. "We are not going anywhere, boy," Thomas reassured him. Rex's tail gave a single affirmative wag before he returned to his post next to Bella, continuing his vigilant guard as the mother dog was ready for transport. The devoted protector was still unwilling to leave his charges outside, even for a brief moment. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the Silver Ridge meadows, and the day's record heat finally started to relent. Fire trucks left one by one. Neighbors gradually went back to their homes, and the normal routine of suburban life slowly resumed. But not for the Harpers. Family nothing would ever be quite normal again. Bella's condition quickly worsened while being transported to the veterinary hospital. The emergency vehicle had just driven out of Silver Ridge Meadows when the German Shepherd started having seizures, her already frail body fighting back against the combined traumas of heat exposure, dehydration, and neglect. Dr. Patel worked feverishly in the back of the speeding vehicle, giving emergency medication and barking updates to the veterinary team while they awaited their arrival at the Harper residence. They had just finished the evening feeding when Emma's phone rang with a message from Dr. Patel. The teenager's face crumpled as she read the text. "Bella's in critical condition," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They do not know if she will make it through the night." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow, and Thomas braced himself against the workbench and Rex. The family was unaware of this development and instead concentrated on maintaining the strict care schedule for the 5 surviving puppies. Ever sensitive to human emotions, he lifted his head from the puppy nest, his amber eyes moving from face to face with obvious concern. "We should be there," Emma insisted, reaching for her jacket. "Bella needs us." "She needs Rex." Thomas looked at Sarah, seeing his tiredness reflected. In her eyes, they had not slept through the night for more than a week. The puppies needed constant care. "The house was in chaos, but she is right," he said. "The logistics proved difficult. I have bottle-fed more creatures than I can count," she said, arriving at their door as if summoned by some sixth sense. "You folks go," she said, already settling into the armchair they would move to the garage for puppy duty. "I have bottle-fed more creatures than I can count. These little ones and I will manage just fine until morning." The entire family felt compelled to support Bella in what might be her final hours. As the family got ready to leave, the German Shepherd paced nervously between the puppy nest and the door, whining softly in obvious distress. Emma said, kneeling next to Rex, "He understands she is in trouble, but he did not want to leave the puppies." This was the eternal dilemma of the protector Maggie, who saw divided loyalties. After careful consideration, they decided that Rex should go with them, and Maggie would call right away if the puppies showed any signs of distress in order to alert the veterinarian. The veterinary emergency hospital was just 20 minutes away, and Rex seemed to understand the decision by carefully inspecting each puppy before letting Emma clip on his leash. The hospital's parking lot was surprisingly full despite the late hour, and the reception area was crowded with anxious pet owners and their animals, many of whom were suffering from heat-related conditions following the day's record temperatures. Dr. Patel met them at the triage desk, and her scrubs were splattered with what they realized with shock was Bella's blood. "Bella's condition is grave," she said without preamble as she led them to a quiet consultation room. The heat exposure triggered a cascade of organ failures. Her kidneys are shutting down, and she has developed DIC, a condition where blood cannot clot properly. "But you can treat that, right?" Emma asked, her young face pinched with worry. "We are trying everything: fluid therapy, plasma transfusions, and cooling protocols. But I need to be honest with you because Bella was already compromised from chronic—" "What about the puppy?" Sarah asked. The one that was with her. Slightly better prognosis, Doctor, Patel said. Puppies are remarkably resilient, and this one is receiving intensive supportive care. I am cautiously optimistic. Neglect and the stress of giving birth may have been too much for her system to handle. We do not allow a dog in the intensive care unit, Dr. Patel said, apologizing as she started. But he is not just any dog, Thomas reminded her. He is a trained search and rescue canine, and he is the reason Bella and all her puppies are alive. Can we see her? Thomas asked Bella, meaning briefly. Dr. Patel acknowledged that she is heavily sedated to control the seizures, but some studies suggest animals can still sense the presence of those they trust. Rex, who had been sitting alertly at Emma's feet, rose at these words. Rex quietly padded into the intensive care unit next to the Harper family after cleaning her thoroughly and donning protective booties. Bella was lying on a treatment table with monitors and IV poles all around her. Her once beautiful coat had been shaved in patches to make room for various medical interventions. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped steadily, monitoring her faltering life signs. Emma choked back a sob at the sight, and even Thomas, who had thought he was ready, felt his chest tighten with emotion. Rex came slowly to the table, his nose twitching as he processed the medical smells. When he reached Bella's side, he sniffed her face delicately, and then placed his muzzle against her neck, resting it there in a tender gesture that made everyone watching cry. For several heartbeats, nothing happened, and then, almost imperceptibly, Bella's tail moved the faintest whisper of a wag. "She knows he is here," Emma whispered. "She knows he is here." The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment and the soft whir of oxygen support. "I have read about therapy dogs helping patients, but this seems different," Sarah said quietly. "Doctor." Patel is watching from the doorway. "Check the monitors with professional interest. Her heart rate has stabilized somewhat," she said, noting that blood pressure is rising slightly as well. Rex remained motionless, his muzzle still pressed against Bella's neck, his eyes half closed as if concentrating. Deeply. Reluctantly, she checked her watch and said, "I am sorry, but we need to continue treatment. You can wait in the family room and I will update you hourly." They tried to get Rex to leave, but he refused to move from Bella's side. When a technician tried to take him away, Rex gave them his first aggressive sound, a low, rumbling growl. "Let him stay," Dr. Patel said abruptly, "just for tonight." Her decision went against hospital procedures, but something about Rex's attitude, his unwavering conviction and steady presence, influenced her professional judgment. The Harper family withdrew to the waiting area, leaving Rex standing sentinel next to the critically ill mother dog. During that long night, the Harper family slept fitfully in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, waking up only when Dr. Patel arrived with updates. By dawn, they were exhausted and confused, but they refused to leave while Bella's at 7:30 a.m. As the first rays of morning painted the eastern sky, Dr. Patel emerged from the treatment area with a different expression, one of cautious relief replacing grim determination, and reported that her values were stabilizing. She said, "The DIC seems to be resolving and her kidney function is improving. I cannot explain it medically, but Bella seems to be pulling through the crisis," and Rex asked Emma immediately. Dr. Patel smiled faintly, and she had not left her side all night. One of my technicians claimed that she had come in to adjust an IV and actually found him. The scene that greeted them in the intensive care unit defied medical explanation. Bella's eyes were open and alert for the first time since her collapse, and more astonishingly, she had managed to move slightly, creating a space beside her where Rex now lay, his body pressed supportively against hers, his head resting protectively over her front paws. Shortly after that, Bella's fever broke, and Thomas rubbed his stubbled face with emotion, making his voice rough. "More confident," Dr. Patel said softly. "I have been practicing veterinary medicine for 16 years, and I have never seen anything quite like this. Your Rex may have accomplished what all our medical interventions couldn't." Emma cautiously approached the table, tears streaming freely down her face. "You did it, Rex," she whispered. "You saved her again." Rex glanced at Emma, and then went back to his self-appointed duty, giving the injured mother dog next to him a look that showed complete dedication. The damage to Bella's kidneys may be permanent, and she will require specialized care for weeks or months. However, if she continues to improve at this rate, she may be stable enough to move to our step-down unit tomorrow. When Thomas asked, "Doctor?" Patel's expression became serious, and we had to make difficult decisions regarding her long-term care. Bella will probably require ongoing medical support, a special diet, and possibly medication. Sarah placed her hand on Thomas's arm before he could react, firmly saying, "For now, let us just be grateful she is alive." It was implied that Bella would require extraordinary commitment from whoever adopted her. Time, resources, and dedication beyond what most pet owners could provide. She may never be the robust, healthy dog she once was. Emma stayed in the treatment room doorway as they were about to leave. Sarah was going to check on the puppies, while Thomas was going to take a shower before work. She watched Rex maintain his watchful position next to Bella. "He will not leave her," she said, combining a statement with a question. Dr. Patel shook her head, saying, "Honestly, I am not sure we could make him leave if we, and at this point I am inclined to consider him part of her treatment plan." She paused, then said quietly, "Sometimes medicine needs to know when to step aside and let something more fundamental take over." 3 days after Bella's near-death experience, Detective Wilson asked the Harper family to meet with them. They gathered around their kitchen table, the formal setting a stark contrast to the chaos that had become their new normal. Emma joined them straight from the garage, her shirt spotted with puppy hair. Her eyes met Emma's across the room, and in that gaze, despite all the medical equipment and clinical surroundings, a silent communication of trust passed from one mother to the humans who had saved her children when she could not. To get right to the point, Detective Wilson started scattering several documents across the table. The case against Victor and Vanessa Whitaker has grown significantly. What started as an animal neglect investigation has uncovered a multi-state illegal gambling and dogfighting operation. The evidence recovered from their residence shows that while Sarah was rushing home from her hospital shift still wearing scrubs, Thomas had canceled his summer curriculum planning session, prioritizing this meeting that might determine the future of the dogs that had so thoroughly disrupted and enriched their lives. Given the seriousness of the charges and the overwhelming evidence, their attorney is considering plea options. One stipulation the prosecutor has already established is that they will forfeit all rights to the animals involved. Emma's face lit up with cautious hope. "Does that mean Bella and the puppies are free?" Wilson asked thoughtfully. In particular, the financial records Vanessa tried to destroy in the fire have resulted in 12 arrests across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. Although the investigation is still ongoing, County Animal Services has petitioned for permanent surrender. If this is granted, which seems likely to happen within the next 2 weeks, they will need permanent placement. Thomas and Sarah exchanged glances and had a silent conversation over the course of the previous sleepless nights, weighing the practical difficulties against the emotional attachments already formed. Wilson continued to breed German Shepherd puppies that were purebred. Interesting backstory. There is already a waiting list of qualified adopters, including some of my law enforcement colleagues. When Bella Sarah asked, Wilson's expression softened, but they all suspected the answer. Dr. Patel's most recent assessment shows that Bella will need ongoing medical care because her kidney function is still compromised, and there is evidence of neurological damage from the heat exposure and seizures. The prognosis for full recovery is limited, meaning that no one will want her, Emma said flatly, with anger flashing in her exhausted eyes. Before anyone could react, the side door opened, allowing Eleanor Richardson to enter. Although not invited to the meeting, she entered with the assurance of someone whose age had freed them from social restrictions. "Pardon the interruption," she said, not sounding particularly sorry. Rex was becoming nervous in the garage. She thought he might do better here. Wilson acknowledged that most potential adopters look for healthy pets. Over the past week, his appearance had subtly changed. The constant alertness of a working dog had softened into something more domestic, but no less dignified. His nails clicked on the tile floor as he made his way around the room, sniffing each person in greeting before settling watchfully at Emma's feet. "How is our mother dog doing today?" "She has managed to feed the returned puppy for brief intervals this morning for the first time since the fire," Maggie said, momentarily deflecting Wilson's question. "It is a small win, but we will take it." "That is actually related to what I came to discuss," Wilson said, referring back to the documents in front of him. "County Animal Services is considering your family for permanent adoption of Bella. Given your demonstrated commitment to her care, the puppies would be placed." Bella had returned home from the veterinary hospital yesterday, her condition upgraded to stable but guarded. The reunion with her puppies had been carefully planned under Dr. Patel's supervision, with Bella still too weak for prolonged contact, but obviously comforted by their presence. Medical consensus that separating them once they are weaned, with the exception of the one that was with Bella during the fire, could jeopardize both of their recoveries. He slid a formal-looking application across the table, which would be expedited due to the circumstances but still requires a home evaluation, financial verification, and commitment to Bella's ongoing medical needs. Thomas picked up the document and scanned its contents. The projected rehabilitation timeline and the estimated monthly costs for Bella's care were sobering. As if to confirm this assessment, Rex raised his head at the sound of his name, his intelligent eyes moving between the humans. "Emma, honey," Sarah said gently, "this is not a simple decision. Bella may need specialized care for years. There are financial considerations, space limitations, and she might die anyway," Thomas added softly. "We need to discuss this as a family." "What is there to discuss?" Emma interrupted. "We cannot abandon her now. Rex would not let us anyway." When the doctor said that Bella would not survive, her voice cracked. "How can we do any less?" The passionate declaration hung in the air, its moral weight undeniable despite its adolescent delivery, and Maggie, who had been unusually quiet, finally said, "Perhaps there is a middle path here." Emma's face flushed with emotion, so we just gave up on her even though Rex did not give up when it was hard. He risked his life to save those puppies. The elderly woman who had unexpectedly become a vital member of their extended family during the crisis was the center of attention. "I have been meaning to speak with you about this," she continued, speaking to Thomas and Sarah. "My daughter in Tucson has been pursuing me for years to move closer to her. The heat is getting harder on these old bones, and rattling around that big house alone does not make much sense anymore," she explained. Thomas scowled. "You are moving, Eleanor. I would not sell the house because Julie has her own place, and, to be honest, we would drive each other crazy with too much togetherness." Her eyes briefly sparkled as she said, "What I am proposing is this. I rent my house to you folks at a reasonable rate. It is nearly twice the size of this one, with that fenced acre in back. Plenty of room for a family, and a few four-legged additions." Wilson, who was watching this exchange with interest, added, That would certainly address the space concerns noted in the preliminary home evaluation. You need space. I need dependable tenants who will not destroy the place. The rental income would supplement my retirement nicely, and I would retain ownership for eventual estate purposes. We would need to run the numbers, Thomas said cautiously. Of course, Eleanor agreed. I am not suggesting charity, just a mutually beneficial arrangement between neighbors. Thomas and Sarah exchanged another look, this one longer and more complex. They had been content in their modest home, but the past 2 weeks had highlighted its limitations. Maggie's house, with its expansive ranch layout and extensive grounds, would indeed solve multiple problems. Emma, who had been following this conversation with increasing excitement, turned to Detective Wilson and said, and she added with a slight smile, I would still be close enough to visit my granddogs regularly. Does this mean we could keep all the puppies too? Thomas started by saying, One step at a time, young lady, Wilson advised with a chuckle. Let us focus on Bella and her special needs puppy first. The others have multiple qualified adopters already interested. The conversation then turned to logistics, paperwork requirements, timelines, and financial considerations. But Thomas eventually noticed Rex, who had risen and moved to the window. Detective, he said, interrupting a technical explanation of the adoption process. You never told us who Michael Ferraro was when you first came to arrest Bob Whitaker. You mentioned that name. Wilson's expression darkened. Ferraro is, he said, observing the German shepherd standing silently, his posture alert but not tense. Following Rex's gaze, Thomas realized that a for sale sign now stood in the Whitakers' front yard, the house behind it still bearing scars from the fire. He is the leader of the biggest dogfighting ring we have found in the Southwest. He has been on our radar for years, but his careful use of middlemen, burner phones, and cash transactions may finally provide us with enough evidence to file federal charges. Sarah asked her nurse if her compassion was turning into a fiercer response, and Wilson nodded grimly. Based on the text messages we found, Whitaker owed Ferraro almost $75,000 in gambling debts, with an agreement to pay off part of that debt. All eyes turned to the German shepherd, who had returned to Emma's side, his steady presence a constant throughout the turmoil of recent days. He did understand Eleanor, who said quietly, "Better than any of us?" The certainty in her voice silenced the room as she said, "With the puppies, 7,000 each, delivered at 8 weeks old to become bait dogs," Emma whispered. The realization dawned on them that the puppies would have endured torture. Officer Cooper would have spent thousands of hours reinforcing that core mission: locate, protect, rescue. Those imperatives do not disappear with a change in circumstance. They become part of the animal's fundamental nature. She continued, rising with the slight stiffness of age and approaching Rex, kneeling carefully before him despite her arthritic knees. She took his scarred face between her weathered hands and looked directly into his amber eyes. She rarely spoke about her military career, but when she did, her expertise was undeniable. "He would be so proud of you," Maggie whispered in her tearful voice. "So very proud." "You saw puppies in distress next door, and their mother was unable to protect them. You followed your training, but James Cooper was right." Rex's ears pricked forward at the mention of his former handler's name, and a little whine escaped his throat. Emma wiped away her tears. Sarah reached for Thomas's hand beneath the table, and Detective Wilson cleared his throat multiple times before continuing, saying, "Well," he said, finally gathering his documents, "I think we have covered everything for today. The application process is straightforward from here. Given the circumstances and the clear bond already formed, I anticipate approval within 2 weeks pending the home assessment." As Wilson was about to leave, he paused at the end. The department's K-9 unit heard about Rex's actions and invited him to receive a commendation at their annual ceremony next month. The door looked back at the tableau of humans and dogs united by extraordinary circumstances. He added that Officer Cooper's family would be present at the ceremony. This final piece of news hung over the room like a benediction, an official acknowledgement of Rex's heroism, and a connection to the handler he had lost after Wilson left. "I suppose we should look at Maggie's rental proposal seriously," Thomas said, finally breaking the silence and the adoption application. The family stayed at the kitchen table, the weight of decision still weighing on them. The practical challenges were significant financial strain, space limitations, and the ongoing demands of Bella's medical needs. But balanced against these concerns stood the powerful moral imperative Emma had articulated, and the living example of courage and commitment that Rex provided daily. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," he said carefully. "But yes, Emma, Bella, and at least one of her puppies have found their forever home." Rex, who had been listening with characteristic attention, rose and padded up as he touched the paperwork Wilson had left. "Does this mean?" Emma asked, hope lighting up her worn face. Thomas then looked at Sarah one last time, seeing in her eyes the same certainty he felt growing in his heart. Inside the Harper home, a different kind of warmth had taken hold, the unbreakable bonds of a family expanded by crisis and cemented by compassion. A year later, Maggie sat in the shade of her sprawling mess tree, quietly satisfied with the scene playing out across her former backyard as the summer sun continued to beat down on Silver Ridge Meadows. He purposefully placed his muzzle on Thomas's knee, a gesture of both gratitude and sealing a pact between species. A series of ramps and modified stairs made it easy for Bella to access the covered porch and shallow waiting pool, which helped her regulate her body temperature during the hot months. The Harper family had turned the area into what Emma jokingly referred to as the Shepherd's Haven, a carefully planned environment that catered to both human and canine needs. Thomas had installed an irrigation system that kept patches of buffalo grass green despite the Arizona heat, creating cool islands amid the desert-appropriate landscaping. "It is bad for a year's work," Maggie said to Sarah, who brought a tray of lemonade to the shaded patio table. "When I rented you folks this place, I never imagined dog paradise." Sarah laughed and settled into the chair next to her. "Sometimes I cannot believe it myself. If you had told me last summer that we would be living in a bigger house with multiple dogs, I would have said you were delusional." "Life has a way of changing our plans," Eleanor noticed, accepting a glass of lemonade with a nod of gratitude, especially when someone like Rex gets involved. Shepard looked up from his spot by the wading pool, where Bella was enjoying the cool water. Although he was now 7 years old and had more silver threading through his muzzle, Rex was still the watchful protector of his growing family. His amber eyes looked around the yard, making sure that everyone in his pack was there. And then he went back to his calm but alert stance. Bella had defied medical expectations over the past year, and although she would never fully recover from the damage to her kidneys and nervous system, careful management had given her a quality of life that seemed unattainable in those crucial days following the fire. Alongside Bella splashing less restrained in the shallow water was the puppy who had shared her ordeal in the superheated shed. Now, a gangly adolescent, Phoenix had grown into his oversized paws and ears, but he still had the playful exuberance that had enchanted the Harper family into keeping him. She had a slight limp, was tired more easily than a healthy dog her age, and needed a special diet and daily medication. However, her eyes were bright, her coat had returned to its luster, and she had developed a gentle dignity that demanded respect from both humans and dogs. His early trauma had delayed his development, but he made up for it with his personality. "Have you heard from any of the other adoptive families?" Maggie asked, observing Phoenix try to play with his more reserved mother. Sarah nodded. "We received an update from the Williamson family yesterday. Their puppy, Willow, whose name they kept from Emma, just received her therapy dog certification, and they are taking her to the children's hospital the following week for her. The adoption of the remaining puppies had gone smoothly after they were weaned. The Harper family had been picky about the adoptive homes, insisting on meeting each potential family several times. Emma had created detailed profiles of each puppy's personality and needs. Maggie's comment on the first official visit was unsurprising. Good bloodlines. This was in spite of the Whitakers' neglect and Rex's influence during those crucial early weeks. This demonstrates that even Maggie, who has decades of experience with dog behavior, was impressed by the situation. Thanks to Emma's advocacy and Detective Wilson's connections, all 4 puppies were placed with families who were aware of their background and dedicated to their welfare. Thomas called to set the platter on the large outdoor table they had added for family get-togethers. "Emma, could you bring out the salad and rolls?" Their daughter, who is now 16 and developing into the encounter with Bella and her pups had solidified Emma's love for animal welfare into a defined career path. She had started volunteering more formally at Desert Paws Rescue and was already looking into veterinary medicine college programs. "Got them right here," she said, balancing a bread basket and a large wooden salad bowl. "Dad," she replied. The Harper family's adoption of Bella and Phoenix, along with their rental of Eleanor's property, had sparked an unexpected community transformation. What started as curiosity about those who took in the rescued dogs had grown into something more significant. A neighborhood that now looked out for each other's welfare with the same attention Rex had shown toward the neglected puppies. Dorothy Miller, once the unwitting Mike Jefferson, a retired paramedic, had offered his services during Bella's early recovery to help Sarah monitor vital signs and administer medications. Even Beverly Wilson, whose gossipy nature had initially heightened suspicions about Rex, now coordinated a pet alert system for the neighborhood that had already reunited 3 lost animals with their owners. This was a significant change from last year, when she was the instigator of the confrontation over Rex's theft. She had become one of Bella's most loyal admirers, regularly bringing homemade dog treats that she had researched to meet Bella's dietary restrictions. Sarah said people are quick to judge what they don't understand and slow to admit mistakes. However, I will give our neighbors credit. Once they saw the truth, most of them stepped up admirably. The conversation paused as everyone filled their plates with the simple meal elevated by the perfect weather and delicious food. Remember how this all began? Half the neighborhood was prepared to call animal control on poor Rex Thomas. He shook his head. "Any news about the Whitaker case?" Eleanor asked after a few minutes of appreciative eating. Thomas nodded and swallowed before responding. "Wilson called yesterday. Victor Whitaker accepted a plea deal of 8 years with the possibility of parole after 5, plus forfeiture of assets connected to the gambling operation. Vanessa received 4 years in exchange for testifying against Ferraro and his associates. Rex and Phoenix joined them at the edge of the dining area, settling onto the special cooling mats Thomas had installed in the shade. Bella stayed in her waiting pool, content to watch from a distance. A somber silence fell over the table as they considered the darker elements that had precipitated their current happiness. "What about Ferraro himself?" Emma asked, her expression hardening at the name of the man who would have condemned the puppies to such a terrible fate. "Trial starts next month," Thomas replied. "Williams says the evidence is substantial, especially with Vanessa's cooperation. They're expecting multiple federal convictions. There are worse influences, but I think Rex deserves more." "When did you get so wise?" Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. Thomas joked, lightening the mood. Eleanor accepted the compliment with a dignified tilt of her head. Enforcement efforts cast a shadow over their personal victory. Emma broke the silence with her voice, carrying the idealism of youth tempered by recent experience. "We can't save everyone. but we should try to save those we can." As though he understood his role, Rex got up and slowly circled the table, checking each human in turn before going back to his place next to Phoenix. The younger dog instantly rolled onto his back in a show of submission that made everyone smile. Has it really only been a year? Sometimes it feels like they have always been part of our family. And sometimes, Thomas said, it feels like yesterday that we were all standing in the garage trying to figure out how to feed 5 puppies every 2 hours, Sarah thought, as she observed the dogs interacting. As the meal came to an end and cleanup got underway, Maggie stayed in her seat, enjoying her guest status and octogenarian privileges. From this vantage point, she saw the family's effortless coordination as Thomas and Emma cleared plates, Sarah stored leftovers, and everyone moved in unison as if they had finally found their rhythm. Rex oversaw this domestic ballet with obvious approval before he turned his attention to Bella, who had finally emerged from the pool. Emerging from her pool, the mother dog shook herself carefully, her movements deliberate where once they might have been fluid, and made her way to the porch steps. While working with military and police dogs for a long time, Eleanor had seen countless examples of canine courage, intelligence, and loyalty. However, there was something unique about Rex, a depth of understanding that went beyond training, and a palpable empathy. The enlarged Harper family gathered on the porch as twilight fell over Silver Ridge meadows, with the first stars emerging in the deep blue sky. Phoenix curled against her side in a remembrance of his early days, and Emma sat cross-legged on the deck next to them, her homework scattered around her but momentarily forgotten as she scratched. "You were right, James," she whispered, addressing the memory of Officer Cooper. He was the best of them all. In the quiet contentment of the gathered beings, both human and canine, there was a harmony that needed no words to convey. A short distance away, the rebuilt Whitaker house stood empty, its for-sale sign serving as a reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. However, Rex, ever watchful, surveyed his domain from his position at Emma's side. From rescuer to guardian, hero to family member, Rex's mission had changed, but not ended at all. In our golden years, when we have lived long enough to understand what really matters, Rex's story reminds us that sometimes the wisest souls walk on 4 legs. This story of an aging hero finding purpose again speaks directly to our hearts. Compassion and dedication. An alternative legacy had taken root, one measured not in property values or social media followers, but in lives saved and connections forged. We have created a pretty good life here. Thomas spoke softly, addressing no one in particular. No one disagreed. We have lived long enough to know that second acts are possible, that family is not always blood, and that sometimes the most profound purpose comes after our working years are supposedly behind us. Rex did remember fighting to protect those who could not protect themselves. Rex never forgot this amazing shepherd who, despite the scars from his previous service, still answered the call when needed. He most embodies the values our generation holds dear: loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage to stand up for what is right even when no one believes you. Rex's story reminds us that true loyalty doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. It comes in the form of quiet strength, selfless action, and an unwavering heart that protects even when misunderstood. In a world so quick to judge and so slow to listen, Rex teaches us that compassion sometimes barks, sometimes limps, but it always shows up. His instincts weren't just trained, they were rooted in love, and that love saved lives. Let this be a gentle reminder. When we take time to look beyond appearances, beyond assumptions, we often find something beautiful, a deeper truth, a second chance, a reason to believe again. If you're thinking about adopting or fostering, do it. Somewhere out there is a dog like Rex, waiting not just to be rescued, but to rescue you in return. Tell us in the comments, what part of Rex's journey moved you the most? Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even the most broken can become heroes. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that prove one heart, human or canine, can change everything. Occasionally, those who rescue us manage to walk on 4 legs. A soldier returns from war, carrying scars no one can see. But Axel, his loyal German shepherd, is always there. The memories of war haunt him, each night filled with nightmares. Will he ever escape the darkness, or will it consume him completely? Through it all, Axel stays, his silent presence a constant. But as Barrett faces the choice to either move forward or be swallowed by his past, will Axel's loyalty be enough to save him? Is their bond strong enough to withstand the weight of the past, or will it break under the pressure? Can love, sacrifice, and loyalty truly heal the deepest wounds? Captain Ryan Barrett had returned from the battlefield, the place where he'd spent his youth fighting in the brutal wars of Afghanistan. Thousands of days spent in the smoke and fire, with the deafening sound of gunshots and the irreplaceable losses, had left scars that could never fully heal. He wasn't the brave soldier he once was anymore. Now he was just a man trying to escape the ghosts of war, searching for peace in a world that felt more and more like a stranger. Cedar Ridge, a small town nestled deep in the hills, seemed like the perfect place to start over. The quiet streets, the fresh air, and the little house he rented all promised a kind of peace that Barrett had longed for. He hoped this place would be his final stop, the last chapter in his journey to find himself after endless years of fighting. But the longer he stayed, the more he realized that peace wasn't so easily found. Every morning, it wasn't the beauty of the sunrise lighting up the window that greeted him. It was the memories crashing into his mind. Faces of fallen comrades, the difficult decisions made on the battlefield, and the pain he couldn't share with anyone. Barrett tried to adjust to civilian life, but he felt like an outsider, unable to connect with those around him. The world around him may have seemed calm, but inside, everything was still a storm, raging and relentless. He wandered into the small coffee shop in town, where everyone had simple stories about life, family, and the quiet moments they cherished. But Barrett couldn't join in their conversations. He could only sit quietly with his hot cup of coffee, staring out the window, seeing nothing but the wounds buried deep in his soul. Each time he saw someone smile, he felt even more out of place, like he didn't belong in a world that seemed so distant. He knew he couldn't live forever in the shadows of his past, but he didn't know how to break free. Nights were endless, plagued by insomnia, with each nightmare pulling him back to the battlefield. He longed for peace, but it always seemed just out of reach. Day after day, Barrett searched for a reason to keep going, but deep down, he felt an exhaustion that words couldn't capture. He couldn't forget what had happened, couldn't escape the images of war that haunted him every night. Cedar Ridge, the place he had hoped would heal him, now seemed like a silent shadow, quietly following him, reminding him that the past wasn't so easily left behind. All Barrett could do was keep walking, keep going, even though he had no idea where he was heading. He wandered through the quiet streets of Cedar Ridge, looking for a place, any place, where he could just forget the pain for a moment. But even as he walked down these quiet streets, there was no escape. The past never stopped chasing him. The road was covered in yellow autumn leaves, but inside him, the weight of the past refused to let go. The gentle breeze brushed against him. But in his mind, the battles never stopped. Then, one day, after a rain shower, with clouds still hanging heavy in the sky, Barrett walked into the coffee shop like he always did. The bell above the door rang softly, a welcoming sound, but no one in the shop paid him any mind. Barrett chose a quiet corner and ordered a black coffee. He sat there, staring out the window where the rain still drizzled. This time he didn't think about the war or the past. He only felt the same loneliness that never seemed to leave him. Then, suddenly, a familiar sound echoed from the door, soft, like a greeting he'd once heard every day. Barrett's eyes froze. The light in the room seemed to dim, leaving only one clear image in his mind: a dog with sleek golden-brown fur and sharp, intelligent eyes, staring straight at him. Axel. Axel, the canine dog Barrett had trained with, his companion who had never left his side on the battlefield. It had been years since they'd been together, since they'd run through the hail of gunfire side by side. But now Axel was standing there, right in front of him, as though time hadn't passed, as though nothing had changed. Barrett sat still, not believing his eyes. Axel looked at him with those familiar eyes, glowing bright as if he recognized his old partner. There was no growl, no defensive posture of a guard dog. Axel simply walked toward Barrett, stopping right by his feet, wagging his tail gently as if to say, "I'm here. Welcome back." They didn't say a word, but they didn't need to. Every step Axel took was a reminder of the days they fought together, running through fields thick with the stench of gunpowder, fighting side by side through the darkest nights, the only light coming from the faint glow of a distant fire and the sound of gunfire echoing from far away. Axel, like the most loyal friend, had always been there, never turning his back when Barrett needed him the most. Barrett reached out, his fingers brushing against Axel's warm coat. In that moment, all the walls inside him seemed to crumble. Memories of war flooded in. He remembered those dark nights, the constant roar of bombs, and how Axel was the only one beside him, helping him face the fear and loss. He remembered hiding in the small bunkers with Axel, feeling peace just by having that companion, even if it was just a dog. The painful memories of comrades who never came home, of wars that never let go, every wag of Axel's tail, every nudge of his solid body, was a reminder of it all. Barrett choked up, struggling to hold back tears, but the emotions swelled inside him. How could he ever forget? How could he escape what had happened? In that moment, it wasn't just a reunion between a man and his dog. It was a reunion of the past and the present, of memories that wouldn't release their grip, no matter how hard he tried to push them away. Axel sat down beside him again, his eyes never leaving Barrett, as if asking, "Why did you leave me? Why didn't you call me when you needed me?" Barrett couldn't answer. He could only sigh, his hands hanging limp at his sides. The suffocating feeling returned, as if he had just been pulled out of a nightmare, back to a world where the ghosts of war still clung to him, never letting him go. Cedar Ridge, this small, beautiful town, was nothing like he'd imagined. He came here hoping to find peace, to forget the painful past. But peace didn't come so easily. The war wasn't just in his memories. It lived in every step he took, in every breath he inhaled, in every silent moment between the people around him. No place felt quiet enough to escape the nightmares. He looked at Axel, the dog who had always been by his side during the darkest hours. It wasn't just the fallen comrades that haunted him. It was what he had to face when trying to return to normal life. Axel was a part of him, inseparable. And now, their reunion sparked memories of the war, stronger than ever. Barrett stood up and walked out of the coffee shop, needing the stillness of the town to clear his mind. He needed a place where no one could see him. Not now. The rain still fell softly, the cool droplets soothing the fire burning inside his chest. But no matter the rain, no matter how hard the wind blew, the shadow of war never left him, clinging like a ghost. He walked along the trail leading to the forest outside the town. There he could hear the wind whispering through the trees, the rustling leaves underfoot. But in his mind, the sounds of gunfire, bombs, and the cries of his fallen comrades still echoed. Axel walked beside him, never leaving, as if to say, "You're not alone in this battle." He remembered the nights of fighting when it was just him and Axel, the dim glow from the floodlights and the sounds of soldiers' footsteps passing by. The long days spent fighting an invisible enemy, the sleepless nights, always on edge. Each battle was a confrontation with life and death, but the most painful part was never truly feeling alive. He existed, he fought, but he didn't know why or what he was fighting for. When he came back, he thought he'd find peace. But now he realized peace wasn't something you could find in a quiet village. Peace wasn't about the space around you. It was about harmony within your soul. And Barrett had never found that harmony. The memories of war kept coming back, unrelenting, impossible to forget. Axel stood beside him, staring into his eyes as if trying to give him some strength. The dog didn't say a word, but his loyal gaze was everything Barrett needed in that moment. He knew Axel would always be here, no matter how the past haunted him. But could he find a way to live without being ruled by his memories? Could he ever let go of the pain that the war had carved into his mind? The answer wasn't clear. But at least with Axel by his side, he didn't feel completely alone. Everything inside him felt like an untangleable mess, and the days in Cedar Ridge didn't make him feel any better. If anything, they only made him more aware that the war had consumed him completely, like a silent shadow that he could never escape. Barrett's silence became a permanent part of his life. He didn't talk about the past, didn't open up to anyone, not even Sarah Connolly, the woman in town who he'd begun to feel something for. Every time he saw her, there was a strange stir in his heart, but he couldn't speak it. Sarah had tried many times to talk to him, but Barrett only responded with silence, a smile here and there that never quite reached his eyes. It was clear that no matter how hard she tried, there was always a distance between them that couldn't be bridged. Their relationship grew slowly, but every time Sarah moved closer, Barrett pulled away. He knew he couldn't keep living in isolation, but he didn't know how to break the cold shell he'd built around himself. Every time Sarah looked into his eyes, it felt like she was staring into the deep wounds of his soul, wounds he had never been ready to share. They didn't meet often, but when they did, the silence between them was thick, almost haunting. One afternoon, as they walked together around town, Sarah gently asked about his past. Barrett said nothing, his steps heavy, eyes fixed ahead. He could feel the worry in her gaze, but he couldn't reach out to pull her closer. He wanted to share, wanted to open up, but the painful memories came rushing in, blocking his words. Every time he tried to speak, a lump would form in his throat, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on his heart. Sarah couldn't understand why Barrett lived in this silence. She knew he was hiding something, but she could never quite figure out what it was. He seemed so alone, and yet, in a way, she felt a deep empathy for him. Those quiet evenings when Sarah found herself alone, she thought about Barrett, about what he had been through, wondering what she could do to help. But his silence made her feel helpless, as if she couldn't reach his heart, no matter how hard she tried. Barrett never spoke, but in his eyes, Sarah could see a pain he couldn't hide. He didn't want to keep living as a shadow of himself, didn't want to keep fighting battles in his mind. But the silence had become the only way to protect himself, the only way to shield himself from the dark memories that had haunted him for years. One night, standing by the window in his room, Barrett looked out at the stars twinkling in the dark sky. He could hear the wind howling outside, but in his mind, the sounds of gunfire and explosions still echoed. Despite living in Cedar Ridge, a peaceful town, his past was a war that never seemed to end. He couldn't forget. He couldn't silence the memories or the silence that had become his only companion. The story of his past had never been told. And maybe it never would be. Barrett knew he couldn't expect Sarah to understand what he'd been through. The pain, the losses, all of it was a burden he had to carry alone. And silence was the way he had learned to survive. Sarah was cautious, never quick to judge or speak out of turn, but when Barrett appeared in the town, she couldn't help but notice him. A soldier returned from war, yet unlike any veteran she had ever met. There was a silence about him, a coldness, a distance that made everyone around him feel uncomfortable. But for Sarah, it sparked her curiosity. She could sense there was something deeper, something hidden beneath that detached exterior. Every time she saw Barrett, she noticed the emptiness in his eyes. He always stared into the distance, as if the world around him didn't exist. She also saw that he couldn't connect with the community the way everyone else did. Though Cedar Ridge was a small town where everyone knew each other, Barrett seemed like a stranger, always on the outside, looking in. She couldn't understand why Barrett acted the way he did, but the unease and loneliness she sensed in him only made her want to reach out more. She began to observe him, noticing the small gestures he thought no one was paying attention to. He often walked alone, stopping at familiar spots around town, but never lingering for long. He never joined in the conversations with others. And when he stood quietly, staring off into the distance, Sarah couldn't help but feel like he wasn't just facing the world around him. He was battling something deeper, something inside. One afternoon, as Barrett walked along the riverbank, Sarah decided to approach him. She didn't know what to say or how to reach him, but she could feel the longing inside him. She wanted him to open up, to share the thoughts and feelings he kept locked away. But as soon as she got closer, Barrett turned and walked away quickly, putting distance between them. A simple gesture, but it felt like an invisible wall had been built between them. Yet Sarah didn't give up. She started noticing Barrett's habits, the signs he didn't realize he was showing. She could tell he wasn't comfortable around others, but she also saw that his loneliness was a pain he couldn't hide forever. Sarah couldn't just stand back and watch him from a distance. She wanted to help, but how could she, when he wouldn't let anyone near? Every time she saw Barrett, a quiet worry would stir inside her. Despite her efforts to get close, the gap between them only seemed to widen. It felt like he was building a solid wall around himself, and no matter how hard she tried, he wouldn't or couldn't let anyone into his world. Sarah began asking around town about Barrett, but the answers she got were vague at best. People knew he was a former Marine, that he had lived through the struggles of war and was now just trying to find peace in the town. But no one could tell her more because Barrett never shared anything with anyone. She realized that this wasn't just silence. It was a wall, a shield he'd built to protect himself from the deep wounds inside. But Sarah didn't give up. She continued to watch him, quietly following his movements from afar. She knew she couldn't help him if he didn't allow it. But at least she wouldn't leave him to fight this battle alone. As time went on, the relationship between Sarah and Barrett became more complicated. Every time they crossed paths, whether it was a brief glance or a short exchange, Sarah felt the distance between them growing. Barrett wasn't easy to reach, and each time she tried, she hit an invisible wall, a clear rejection without words. Even though he didn't say it, his actions made her feel like she couldn't get any closer. There were times when Sarah felt frustrated, wanting to give up. She could feel the pain Barrett carried, but she couldn't find a way to help him release it. She knew his past was too painful, too complicated for someone like her to just waltz in and fix. But despite everything, her feelings for him didn't change. No matter how many times she failed, she remained determined not to walk away, not to leave him fighting his loneliness alone. One afternoon, as Sarah worked in the coffee shop, she saw Barrett walk in. As always, he moved quietly, his gaze distant, not meeting anyone's eyes. Sarah watched him from behind the counter, her heart once again rising with the same familiar ache. Sarah could feel a sense of unease whenever she saw him, and the more she watched, the more she realized how much Barrett needed help, though she couldn't reach him the way she wanted. This feeling of helplessness only wore her down, making every effort seem like it led nowhere. Yet, she couldn't give up on him. She slowly started to realize that Barrett couldn't open up easily to her or to anyone. He was too accustomed to loneliness, too familiar with the pain he couldn't share. Changing someone like him was difficult. But Sarah also understood that if he ever found a way to heal the deep wounds inside him, if he could ever let go of the past, that decision would have to come from him. She couldn't force it, but she could be there when he needed someone. One late evening, as they worked together in the cafe, Sarah noticed something different in Barrett's eyes. He didn't say a word, but in that look, she sensed something had shifted. Barrett's eyes displayed a weariness and a quiet surrender, yet they were not devoid of hope. It was the first time Sarah felt like he might be considering sharing something, even just a tiny part of his past. But as she approached, Barrett shook his head, as if to tell her it wasn't the right moment. Still, his gaze wasn't as cold as it had been before. Sarah knew he was slowly opening up, but only a little, and not all at once. Their relationship was still a long journey, a path with many twists and turns, and she had no idea where it would lead. But one thing was clear. No matter how patient she had to be, she wouldn't give up. Sarah would always be there for Barrett, waiting for him to step out of the darkness. Their relationship grew more complicated, not just because of Barrett's internal wounds, but because of the silence and distance he created. That silence didn't just make Sarah feel helpless, it made Barrett even more isolated. However, this was merely a glimpse of the deeper issues. What Barrett truly faced every day wasn't just Sarah's distance or the silence of those around him. It was the memories of war, buried deep in his mind, that wouldn't let go. The long nights when he tried to close his eyes, but the past would rise like a nightmare that never left. Each night, as darkness fell, Barrett felt as though he couldn't escape the shadows of those memories. The images of the battlefield, the faces of his fallen comrades, the sounds of gunfire, bombs, and the screams of innocent people. They all came rushing back, haunting him in his sleep. He would wake up in the middle of the night, soaked in sweat, heart pounding in his chest, gasping for air, unable to breathe. The panic felt like a crashing wave, pulling him back to the horrific moments he couldn't forget. Some nights, he couldn't sleep at all. Just closing his eyes brought it all back. The faces of his old comrades, the smiles, the hopeful glances that vanished in an instant. The nights they sat around the campfire, telling stories of families and distant dreams. But then everything changed in a single moment. A blast, a final wave, and they were gone. Each time he remembered, Barrett couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. The comrades who had died, and he was still alive. It was a burden he couldn't escape. He hadn't been able to save them. He hadn't been able to stop the storms of war. These thoughts haunted him constantly, making him feel as if he didn't deserve to live in peace. Each morning, Barrett felt further disconnected from reality. He tried to work, tried to fit in with life in Cedar Ridge, but in his mind, everything remained vivid. The images from the battlefield haunted him. It was a reality he couldn't escape. Every time he saw dark clouds in the sky, he was reminded of those rainy days in Afghanistan, days where sleep was elusive and death was always close. Barrett couldn't tell anyone how he felt. He didn't want Sarah or anyone in the town to worry. Barrett aspired to avoid portraying himself as weak or as a soldier who had failed. So he remained silent, a way to protect himself and those around him from the ghosts of the war. But occasionally, the weight of it all became too much. The memories swirled in his mind, the gunshots, the explosions, and the images of his comrades dying in his arms. It was a nightmare that never stopped. He knew that if he didn't face the past, he would never find peace. But how could he confront it when it hurt so much? Barrett didn't have time to think about these questions anymore. He had to act, to face the present danger that was threatening Cedar Ridge, and most of all, he had to face himself. A group of armed criminals, about a dozen of them, had suddenly attacked Cedar Ridge. They came from who knows where, but once they arrived, there was no intention of leaving peacefully. Their guns were loaded, and the sound of gunshots echoed through the quiet town, waking a fear that spread like wildfire. Barrett didn't hesitate. As the first shot rang out, he instantly recognized the danger. The soldier inside him awoke, clear and powerful. He sprang from his chair in the cafe, grabbing the weapon bag he'd kept hidden since arriving in Cedar Ridge. Axel, sensing the danger, sprang from behind the counter and ran to him, ready to stand beside him in this new fight. With Axel by his side, Barrett rushed outside, heading toward the town center where the criminals were moving. It wasn't a battlefield, but everything inside him felt like a fast-forwarded movie. Each step, each decision was marked by the intensity of the battles he had fought before. Axel was with him, like an inseparable companion, ready to face this new threat together. In that tense moment, Barrett felt it deeply. The memories of war couldn't be buried forever. He could live in silence, he could avoid it, but he couldn't run from who he was. What he needed now wasn't to hide, but to rise up and face it, face the enemy in front of him, and face the pain inside. The battle was over quickly, but it was brutal. Barrett and Axel weren't alone. The townspeople, despite having no combat experience, stood together to protect their families and homes. Gunfire, shouting, the sound of furniture being thrown, the crashing of wooden planks. It was chaos all around. In that moment of madness, Barrett had one goal: to protect this town, to protect people he didn't even know. Bullets flew past him, grazing his coat, but he didn't stop. After all these years of fighting, his eyes were cold and his heart was as steely as ever. But every time he looked at Axel, he knew he wasn't alone. With Axel by his side, Barrett felt something shift within him. He wasn't fighting just for himself anymore. He was fighting for others, for Cedar Ridge, and for himself. In one moment, as a criminal rushed toward him, gun ready to fire, Axel didn't hesitate. The dog leaped forward, biting into the criminal's arm, forcing him to fall back. Barrett seized the opportunity, spun around, and grabbed the gun from the criminal's hands, taking him down immediately. Axel returned to his side, standing loyally by him, making sure Barrett never had to face danger alone. After the battle, everything was eerily silent. When the last of the criminals was defeated, Cedar Ridge was safe once again. But Barrett knew the wounds in his soul hadn't healed. What he had experienced in this battle couldn't erase the past. But at least he had done one thing. He had stood up. Looking at the people of Cedar Ridge, he realized something important. Peace wasn't about running from the past. It was about accepting it. Barrett couldn't change what had happened, but he could choose how to move forward. And this time, he didn't have to do it alone. Axel was still there, and maybe one day Sarah would be there too. But first he needed to face himself and find a way to heal the wounds inside. Cedar Ridge may not have been the place he had imagined, but maybe it would be the place where he could finally find true peace, not by forgetting the past, but by learning to live with it. It was a lesson he never thought he would have to learn. But now it had become an essential part of his healing journey. The day after the battle, when everything had returned to normal, Cedar Ridge slowly regained its peaceful rhythm. But Barrett still felt heavy inside. He saw the remnants of the battle everywhere, not in the streets or the broken homes, but in his mind. The memories of war, of the comrades who had fallen, of the hard decisions he had to make in every moment of battle. None of that would disappear because of one small fight. Barrett stood on the rock by the riverbank, a place he had stood many times during his time in Cedar Ridge. The waves gently lapped at the shore, but the stillness he longed for in his mind never came. He looked into Axel's eyes, the canine dog who had been his most reliable companion in all those battles. Axel sat beside him, his eyes bright, as if understanding the thoughts in Barrett's heart. Barrett smiled faintly, a brief smile, but one filled with a world of emotion. This loyal dog didn't need to say a word, yet his presence brought Barrett more comfort than anything else. Axel was living proof of a friendship that had withstood it all. While his other comrades were gone, Axel remained by his side, never abandoning him like the rest of the world had. Barrett sat down, gently stroking Axel's warm fur, the feeling washing over him like a wave. The memories he couldn't escape still haunted him, but for the first time, he felt like he could accept them, live with them, without letting them control his life. He remembered the days of fighting alongside Axel, when everything around them was dust and explosions. But it was the bond between him and the dog that had helped him get through it all. Each battle, each moment of fear, Axel had been there, a constant companion, showing him the true meaning of loyalty. Every time danger came, Axel was always there, strong and unwavering, never letting Barrett face those challenges alone. Even now, with no more war, Barrett still felt the invisible support Axel provided. The dog wasn't just protecting him from external enemies, he was protecting him from the nightmares in his mind. Barrett realized that the friendship with Axel was exactly what he needed to face his mental wounds. Though the past of war couldn't be erased, he no longer had to face it alone. Axel proved that true friendship could help him overcome the pain, showing him that life could still move forward and that he didn't have to live in darkness forever. Barrett's steps didn't feel as heavy as before. He felt himself slowly accepting what had happened instead of trying to run from it or deny it. Cedar Ridge may not have been the place he imagined, but it had become the place where he found peace within himself. He didn't need to forget the past. He just needed to learn how to live with it, like he had done with Axel, a friendship with no judgment, only presence and unconditional love. Barrett stood up, looking ahead at the clear blue sky, no longer marred by dark clouds. He knew the journey ahead would still be long, and the past would always be there. But now, he didn't feel haunted by it. He had Axel by his side, and maybe one day Sarah would be there too, when he was ready to share his pain. But a new feeling stirred within him, a feeling he couldn't deny, one of uselessness. Though he had faced the enemy, though he had protected the town from the attack, after it all, Barrett couldn't find peace in his life. Each day passed without a clear purpose, like he was lost in a maze of sorrow, not knowing where to go or what to do. His time in Cedar Ridge had never been what he imagined. This small town couldn't fill the void inside him, couldn't help him erase the memories of war, and it certainly couldn't help him overcome the loneliness creeping into his heart. Barrett returned to his small house, where there was only silence and darkness. Axel, his loyal dog, was still there by his side, But could that ever be enough to make him feel less alone? Deep down, Barrett knew that Axel wasn't just a pet. He was part of him, a comrade who had never abandoned him. But even the presence of the dog couldn't erase the feeling that he was no longer of value, that he had failed in his search for true peace. Sitting quietly, staring out the window, Barrett felt caught between two worlds. He wasn't the tough soldier he once was, but he couldn't return to being just a normal person either. The memories of war still haunted him, but the relationships with people in Cedar Ridge seemed impossible to start. He couldn't integrate into life here, couldn't connect with those around him, not even with Sarah. Even though she was kind and cared for him, he felt like she couldn't truly understand what he had been through. And that made Barrett feel even more distant, closing himself off even more. He wondered, could he live a normal life after everything that had happened? Could he become a normal person, living in a community like everyone else? Or was he just a ghost, a soldier who had lived too long in war and couldn't find his way back? These questions circled in his mind, with no clear answers. Barrett passed by happy families or overheard cheerful conversations in the cafe. He felt more and more like an outsider. He couldn't join in their stories. Everything felt so foreign, so ordinary compared to what he had been through. He didn't know how to find his way back, how to fit in. No matter how hard he tried, every step in this life felt heavy, slow, as if something invisible was pulling him back, keeping him from moving forward. Sarah continued to approach him, still trying to befriend him. But the more she reached out, the more Barrett felt the distance between them grow. He couldn't open up, couldn't tell her about the past. He was afraid that if he shared, if he let her see the deep wounds inside him, she wouldn't understand. He feared she wouldn't accept him as he was. He feared disappointing her, and that disappointment could cost him the only person who was still trying to help him. Yet every time Sarah looked at him with concern in her eyes, Barrett felt a quiet wave stir inside him. He knew she wanted to help, but he felt so unworthy of her kindness. He felt useless, weak, unable to accept the care of others. It was a feeling that clung to him, suffocating his heart and pushing him further away from everyone. Barrett felt like a stranger in this world. Though he had fought, done everything a soldier could do in this life, he didn't know who he was anymore. He couldn't find peace. Every day passed in silence and loneliness, as if everyone around him were just blurry figures, unable to touch his heart. Even though he knew Sarah cared and was trying to get close, he felt an insurmountable distance. Sarah kept trying to reach him, but with every step she took, Barrett took another step back. She cared for him in the way she felt was right, always trying to draw out stories, always trying to make him laugh, to make him open up. But Sarah's efforts weren't met as she had hoped. Barrett couldn't and didn't want to open up to her. He kept a distance, an invisible wall between them. Her questions, her concerned looks, only made him feel more suffocated. Sarah could feel the difficulty in approaching Barrett. She wasn't someone who gave up easily, but each time she tried to get closer, Barrett found ways to push her away. She didn't understand why he acted the way he did, why he rejected the care of others, especially hers. When they spoke, even if it was just a few brief words, Sarah always felt the coldness in his tone and his attitude. He never shared anything about himself, never opened up to her, never spoke about his past or the emotions locked inside. This made Sarah feel more powerless. She was used to helping those around her, but with Barrett, every effort seemed in vain. Every time she reached out, he pulled away, creating a distance she couldn't cross. Despite her worry and desire to help, Sarah didn't know what more she could do for Barrett to accept her concern. But Sarah wouldn't give up. She continued to observe Barrett from a distance, silently, but never stopping her efforts. She knew he carried deep wounds, painful memories he wasn't ready to face. She couldn't force him to share them, but she could be there to listen when he was ready. Sarah understood that someone like Barrett couldn't easily open up. But her persistence wasn't by chance. She could see the hurt inside him, and she wanted to help him overcome it, even if only a little. One evening, as the sky began to darken, Sarah found Barrett standing by the river, his eyes fixed on the shimmering water under the fading sunlight. She quietly approached, not wanting to startle him, and stood next to him in silence. Barrett felt her presence, but didn't turn around. There was no greeting, no question, just the weight of silence hanging between them. "Barrett, I know you're going through so much," Sarah spoke softly. "But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm always here. You don't have to carry all of this alone." Barrett didn't respond, but in his eyes, Sarah saw something. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't acceptance either. He stood there, a soldier, a man with wounds that no one could see. He couldn't speak, but in that moment, Sarah felt a part of him that he had never shared. It was a heavy silence, a quiet strength that only those who had experienced loss could understand. "No one can change your past," Sarah continued, trying to find the gentlest words. "But I believe you don't have to bear all that pain by yourself." Barrett remained silent, not turning to look at her. He felt exhausted, not just from the battle outside, but from the one inside himself. The emotions he had buried, the painful memories, came rushing back, taking over him little by little. He wanted to speak, wanted to share, but the words were stuck in his throat, trapped and unspoken. Sarah stood there, quietly, not rushing to leave. She knew Barrett needed time. She knew he couldn't face everything at once. But she also knew that one day he would understand he didn't have to stand alone. Barrett felt her presence, but he only looked ahead, saying nothing. A familiar feeling stirred inside him, a feeling he had known for far too long, hopelessness. He knew he was in a very different situation now, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. This wasn't fear of the future or worry about what lay ahead. It was the emptiness he couldn't fill. Despite the people around him, despite Sarah always trying to reach out, he still felt lost. The loneliness wasn't about a lack of care or love. It was the absence of a place he truly belonged. Barrett sighed, his tired eyes fixed on the quietly flowing river. Every day he tried to find comfort, but it felt as distant as ever. He couldn't find peace in his work, in his encounters with the townspeople, or even in the quiet moments with Axel. Every day he sank deeper into loneliness, and it became harder to integrate into this life. He couldn't avoid the self-questioning. Why couldn't he live like everyone else? Why couldn't he simply be a man living in a small town, without war, without painful memories, without nightmares haunting him every night? Why did he still carry the scars of the past? The wounds that couldn't heal, the memories that wouldn't fade. They made Barrett feel like he could never start fresh like everyone else. Even though he wanted to push them aside, to live a peaceful life, the memories of war kept pulling him back. Every time he thought he had found a bit of peace, the past came rushing in. The comrades who had fallen, the life or death decisions he had to make in the blink of an eye, all of it came back to him in every dream, every waking moment. He couldn't escape it. Every effort Barrett made seemed pointless. Every time he tried to open up to Sarah or anyone else, he was met with an invisible wall inside himself. He couldn't open up, couldn't share. Even when Sarah stood right there, within arm's reach, her eyes full of care and concern, he still couldn't reach her. Because he couldn't reach himself. He couldn't face what he had gone through, couldn't face what had changed him forever. When night fell, everything came back to his mind, like an unrelenting storm. The hopelessness rose again, like a wave crashing over him, pulling him deeper into the abyss. He didn't know what to do to escape it. He didn't want to keep living like this, but he didn't know how to change. He had tried to run, tried everything to forget the past, but the ghosts still lingered, never letting go. Barrett felt exhausted, not physically, but mentally. He didn't know if he could keep going, if he could find a way out of this loneliness. Every day he tried, but he couldn't understand why everything felt so hard. Everything seemed so far away, so unclear, as if he was walking down an endless road with no destination. Sarah was still there, but the distance between them was too great for Barrett to overcome. She wanted to help him, but he didn't know how to accept that help. He couldn't change, couldn't show her the real him, because he didn't even know who he was anymore. This cycle continued, and Barrett sank deeper into his solitude. The paths in his heart seemed to have no way out, no light at the end of the tunnel. Sarah kept trying to reach him, and even with Axel by his side, all Barrett could feel was the invisible distance, the strange disconnect between him and the world around him. That night, as a powerful storm hit Cedar Ridge, Barrett's heavy thoughts only grew more clouded. The rain poured down on the town, wind howling through the trees, making the air feel even heavier. The streets were empty, the streetlights dim in the dark. But the silence didn't last long. Suddenly, the distant sound of a siren shattered the stillness. Barrett stood up, gripping his jacket tightly, his sharp gaze focused on the window. He could feel a shift in the atmosphere, like something was about to happen. Axel stood beside him, ears perked, eyes glowing in the darkness, sensing the unease. All the years of training, all the battles that never left his memory, came rushing back in that moment. There was no time to think. Barrett grabbed his gun and rushed out of the house. Cedar Ridge wasn't the place Barrett imagined this would happen. A peaceful town where the people lived simple, quiet lives. But when the sound of gunfire rang out from the town center, everything changed. Barrett and Axel rushed outside, heading straight for the source of the noise, where the darkness and rain still covered everything. A group of armed criminals, about a dozen of them, had infiltrated the town. They came from nowhere, only to attack and loot without hesitation. Gunshots rang out continuously through the dark night. The frantic screams of the townspeople carried on the wind. The attackers showed no mercy, moving swiftly through the streets, attacking anyone who got in their way. Axel ran ahead, undeterred, as if he knew exactly what to do. Barrett followed, his heart racing, his eyes fixed on Axel's every movement. Trained in harsh conditions, Axel was the only companion Barrett could trust in this moment. While everything around them descended into chaos, Barrett had only one focus: protect Cedar Ridge, protect the innocent people under threat. When a criminal suddenly appeared in front of him, Barrett didn't hesitate. He raised his gun, aiming directly at the man pointing a weapon at him. The shot echoed through the night, and the criminal dropped instantly. But before Barrett could even exhale in relief, another wave of attackers surged forward, forcing Barrett to run again. Axel charged into the fray, fearless, biting down on one of the criminal's hands, causing him to stagger. Barrett seized the opportunity and quickly took down the enemy. But with every step, with every bullet fired, Barrett felt the return of the past. Each confrontation, every action, reminded him of his battles in the military. The sounds of gunfire, explosions, and screams all resurfaced in him, as though he was still on the battlefield, with no place to hide. The past was never easy to shake off. It was always present, always returning whenever danger loomed. In the midst of the chaos, Barrett glanced at Axel, the dog who never left his side, even in the fiercest battles. A moment passed, and Barrett realized something he had never considered before. Every fight wasn't just about protecting others. It was about confronting himself. His past couldn't be buried. It still lived inside him. And for the first time, Barrett felt like he could face it. As the criminals were defeated and the town returned to silence, only the sound of rain pattering on the rooftops remained. But inside Barrett there was no peace. He stood there, looking at Axel, realizing that what he had just experienced wasn't just a fight with outside enemies, but a battle with himself. Even though he had protected the town, he hadn't been able to protect himself from the ghosts of his past. Barrett took a deep breath, feeling the cold gusts from the storm still blowing. The heavy feeling refused to leave him. He looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling not from the cold, but from the tension that had built up all night. Each fight had been about survival, about protecting others, but he couldn't escape the feeling of loss and guilt. The faces of his fallen comrades still haunted him, the ones he couldn't save, the decisions he still couldn't forgive himself for. Axel stood beside him, looking up at him with eyes that seemed to say, "You don't have to do this alone." Barrett bent down and gently petted Axel's thick fur, feeling the warmth of the dog's presence. Axel had always been by his side, strong and unwavering, ready to fight for what was right. And even when he couldn't save everyone, Axel was still there, beside him. Yet Barrett couldn't keep living in guilt. He had overcome too many challenges to give up now. Yes, the past still lingered, but he realized that he couldn't let it control his life anymore. He couldn't keep living in the shadow of old wounds. If he couldn't save all the people he loved in the past, at least he could protect the ones in the present. Barrett stood tall, his gaze no longer lost. He knew every step he took carried memories that couldn't be erased, but he also knew he couldn't let those memories stop him from acting. What he needed now was a clear purpose, a reason to keep moving forward, to not drown in the ghosts of the past. "Axel," Barrett said, his voice low and resolute, "we won't stop. We'll protect them, not to redeem ourselves, but to prove that we can still do something." Axel looked up, his eyes glowing, as if understanding Barrett's words. The dog didn't need to answer. Just standing beside him was enough. Cedar Ridge had quieted once more, but Barrett knew this peace was only temporary. These criminals weren't the only threat the town faced. There would be more challenges, more uncertainties, but Barrett had decided he wouldn't let fear control him anymore. He would fight for the people around him, for those who needed his protection. He wouldn't back down. The most important thing was that Barrett had realized something he hadn't been able to admit for a long time. He had to keep living, not for himself, but for others. For Cedar Ridge, for the people he cared about, for Axel, and maybe for Sarah. He hadn't opened up to her, but that didn't mean she didn't care. He knew that if he wanted peace, he had to learn how to accept the help and love of those around him. Barrett turned back to look at the town, where the people had started returning to their normal lives. Some stood at their windows, looking out with worried but grateful eyes. They were thankful for those who had protected them, and Barrett felt a deep sense of responsibility toward them, not just to protect them, but to make a promise that he wouldn't give up. "We can do this," Barrett whispered to Axel, as a reminder to himself. He wouldn't let the past control his life anymore. He would keep fighting, keep living, for those who needed him. The real battle was a battle to find himself. Every step he took, every decision he made, was tied to memories he couldn't forget, images, explosions, promises left unfulfilled. The memories of war, the pain of the past, still loomed like a shadow, haunting him no matter how hard he tried to escape. Barrett stood silently in the dark, his eyes distant as he gazed into the space around him. The rain continued to fall, but the air had softened a little. He thought back to the days of fighting, the times he had to choose between life and death, between protecting loved ones or enduring pain himself. Those decisions had never been easy, and even though he fought with everything he had, did everything he could, there was still a feeling inside him, a sense that he hadn't done enough. Axel, the loyal dog, stood by his side, silent and steadfast. Barrett looked into Axel's eyes, the faint light from the lamp casting a soft glow on his fur. Though just a dog, Axel possessed a perseverance that Barrett couldn't help but admire. Axel had always been there, asking for nothing, needing no explanations, just standing by him, waiting and fighting. In that moment, Barrett felt a stirring in his heart. Axel didn't need to say a word, yet his presence was everything. Just like Axel had stood by him in every battle, Barrett realized he had to learn to stand strong in his own life. Barrett couldn't run from his past forever. He couldn't let the memories of war, the emotional scars, dominate his life any longer. If he kept living in fear and guilt, he would never move forward. He had to face what had happened, not to change the past, but to live a better life, no matter how painful that process might be. Never before had Barrett felt so weak. He had fought in war, faced death, but none of that compared to the internal battle he was now fighting. He had once thought that war was the worst thing he'd ever experience, but now he realized that the greatest battle wasn't with an enemy outside, it was with himself. It was the battle not to let the past crush him, to continue living, even without perfection. The hardest part was accepting that he couldn't control everything. With every step, every time he faced the memories, he realized more and more that he couldn't stay hidden in the shadows forever. He had to learn to let go, to forgive himself, and not let the wounds of the past prevent him from moving forward. He had to learn to live for those around him, for Cedar Ridge, for Axel, for Sarah, and maybe for himself. He couldn't keep living in guilt and helplessness. Barrett took a deep breath, and an unexpected sense of relief washed over him. Though the past would always be there, he no longer felt trapped by it. He could stand tall. He could move forward, not to escape, but because he was ready to face everything, ready to live again, no matter how hard it would be. He looked down at Axel once more. The loyal dog didn't say a word, but Barrett understood. Axel had taught him a lesson far greater than war. Never give up, never retreat, and most importantly, never give up on yourself. The cold wind blew through the grass, tangling Axel's fur, but the dog remained steadfast, his gaze never leaving Barrett, full of unwavering loyalty. Barrett gently patted Axel's head, not to comfort the dog, but because he needed comfort from within himself. In the days after the war, Axel was the only thing that kept him from feeling completely alone. The dog didn't need to speak a word, but his eyes said it all. And in that moment, Barrett realized something he had been trying to avoid for so long. He couldn't keep living in the shadows of the past. The nightmares still haunted him every night. Even though he had returned from war, even though Cedar Ridge offered him the peace he had longed for, deep inside, the memories of war still lingered. The sounds of gunfire, explosions, and images of fallen comrades were ever present in his mind. Every night when he closed his eyes, the nightmares came crashing in, pulling him into an endless spiral. The horrifying images, the tough decisions he had to make in the war, all of them vivid as though they had happened just yesterday. He remembered the feeling of watching his comrades fall, the desperate cries in the stillness, the bright red blood staining the muddy ground. Each time, Barrett felt helpless. He couldn't save them, and that feeling had never left him. Recalling those moments kept him from finding peaceful sleep. Even though Cedar Ridge was quiet, and the people here were warm and welcoming, he couldn't escape the shadow of the past. It clung to him, lurking in every step he took. Barrett couldn't explain this to Sarah. She was the only one who cared for him, but he couldn't reveal the pain inside. He was afraid that if he shared it, she wouldn't understand, and it would become a burden for her. He feared becoming a burden to those around him. He didn't want to make her suffer. He felt guilty for not opening up, for not sharing the memories he carried. He kept avoiding it. But the more he avoided, the lonelier he became. Yet, whenever Axel sat by his side, Barrett felt a part of him slowly changing. The dog didn't need words, just his presence. It was Axel who taught him that not everything had to be faced alone. He needed to learn to open up, to share, to face the wounds inside. He couldn't keep living in this loneliness and fear. One night, as a storm rolled in, Barrett woke in the dark. He heard the wind howling through the window, the rain hammering against the roof. But in his heart, the storm was much stronger. The memories of war, the sounds of gunfire, the painful decisions, they spiraled through his mind, as if they would never stop. He exhaled sharply, trying to push away the images, but the harder he tried, the clearer they became. He sat up, unable to look into the darkness around him, fearing he would be sucked back into it. Axel stood beside the bed, lowered his head to look at Barrett, and gently moved closer. Barrett reached out, patting Axel's head, feeling the comfort of the dog. He didn't say anything, but Axel's presence was enough to remind Barrett of something important. He didn't have to face everything alone. Though the past was always there, though the memories couldn't be erased, Barrett knew he had to start learning how to face them, not let them control him anymore. Barrett stood up, stretching wearily, and decided that he wouldn't let the nightmares of war rule him any longer. He had to learn to accept it, to live with it, not run from it forever. The past would always be there, but he couldn't let it control his life anymore. That was the change he needed to make. And from this moment on, he would try to face it, bit by bit, every day. Barrett's steps in his journey toward healing were slow, but each step was a victory. And one of the most important people in that journey was Sarah. She wasn't just his close friend. She was the one who helped him see himself again, to confront the unresolved emotions from his past. Sarah continued to be Barrett's support in his healing journey. In the early days after he returned to Cedar Ridge, the silence between them couldn't erase the pain Barrett carried inside. He wasn't ready to open up, and the wounds in his soul felt like scars that would never heal. But Sarah listened patiently, never forcing him to share, just simply being there when he needed her. Every time he felt lost, just looking into her eyes, he felt like he could keep going. Though silence was something Barrett had grown accustomed to, slowly, as the safety of Sarah's presence built trust, he began to open up, not with grand stories, but with small fragments of memories he had never shared with anyone. On quiet evenings, when they sat together by the warm fire, Sarah's gentle questions helped him slowly untangle the knots in his heart. She never forced him to tell everything, but each time he shared even a small part, she listened without judgment. Sarah realized that Barrett's wounds couldn't be healed by just words of comfort or silence. Each time she encouraged him to open up, she knew it wouldn't be easy. Barrett had become so accustomed to hiding his feelings, carrying the weight of his pain alone, not wanting to burden anyone. But Sarah was patient, because she understood that his healing wasn't just about whether he shared or not. It was about whether he dared to face those emotions. She continued to encourage Barrett, helping him realize that his emotional wounds wouldn't heal if he kept shutting them away. The emotions he had suppressed for so long couldn't simply disappear by turning his back on them. And every time Barrett started talking about the past, even just a little, she saw a shift in him, even if it was small. A smile would flash across his face when he spoke of memories less painful, a hint of relief in his eyes when he didn't have to hide them anymore. That feeling of relief, though not enough to erase the long nights full of nightmares, was the first step toward healing. Barrett no longer felt like he was running from the past. Each time he faced those memories, he felt like he had more control over them, instead of being ruled by them. Sarah wasn't just a companion in this journey. She was the one who helped Barrett realize that healing didn't come from forgetting the past, but from learning to live with it. She was an essential part of this journey, always there, patient, never pushing, just standing beside him. She understood that deep wounds needed time, but with each time Barrett shared, even just a small piece of his story, even a rare moment, she could feel the change in him. Although Barrett still struggled to open up, with Sarah's help, he began learning how to face the past, learning to not let the pain take over his life. And each time he spoke of what he had buried deep inside, a part of him grew lighter. Though he couldn't forget, he was slowly learning to accept. It wasn't perfect, but at least he had started. It wasn't perfect, but at least he had begun. The long nights remained Barrett's biggest challenge. Although he had made progress in his healing, when the night fell, the memories of war came rushing back, stronger than ever. Every night, he faced those images he couldn't forget, the comrades who had fallen, the moments of decision he couldn't change. The sounds of gunfire, explosions, and the faces that were gone forever, all of them came like waves, washing away the peace he had tried to build. But now, when Barrett looked at Sarah, a different feeling began to rise within him. She was the only one who had patiently stayed, the only one who hadn't left him, no matter how many emotions he kept hidden. It was because of her that he began to understand something important. The past would never completely leave him, but he could learn how to live with it. Barrett could no longer continue living in the shadow of war. He realized that to truly live, he couldn't keep avoiding what had happened. The painful memories would always be there, but he couldn't let them keep defining his life. A part of him still wanted to avoid it, to continue living in silence, in the protective shell he had built to shield himself from the turbulent waves of the past. But every time he faced it, even just a small part, he felt stronger. Each small step, each gentle share with Sarah, gradually helped him break free from the ghosts in his mind. In the beginning, when he first started speaking of the memories he had buried, the confusion within him was overwhelming. He feared that if he shared, if he exposed those things, he would appear weak. But when Sarah didn't judge him, when she simply listened and stayed by his side, he felt like he was unraveling the knots in his heart. She never forced him to tell it all, but her patience created a safe space for him to begin to open up. Gradually, Barrett realized that pain only truly began to fade when he dared to face it. Running away wasn't the solution. Acceptance was the key to finding peace. Every time he remembered the past, he no longer felt paralyzed. Though the pain still lingered, instead of running from it, Barrett chose to face it. The nightmares still visited him, but now he no longer feared waking up. He couldn't change the past, but he could take control of his life from today. Acceptance didn't mean forgetting, but learning how to live with it, without letting it dictate his decisions or the present moments. Barrett looked at Sarah, her eyes always warm and gentle. He felt the unconditional support from her, and for the first time, he felt like he could find peace. Though the wounds inside him hadn't fully healed, at least he didn't feel alone anymore. He realized that not all wounds could heal immediately, but starting to face them was the first step toward healing. In his toughest moments, when he felt like he couldn't endure any longer, the memories would come crashing back like a tidal wave. But this time, Barrett didn't crumble. He understood that to keep going, he had to learn to love himself, accept his mistakes, and not let the past control everything. Every memory, every nightmare, was no longer something to fear. Instead, they were parts of him he needed to face in order to live more fully. Even though the war's past still haunted him, Barrett no longer felt trapped by it. He knew he would have to fight these ghosts for the rest of his life. But he also realized that he wasn't fighting alone. Sarah and Axel had been by his side through this journey, and they were the driving force that kept him moving forward. The memories of war still haunted him like undercurrents, always lurking, ready to pull him back into the inescapable pain. But after each night of waking in panic, he realized that if he kept living in the shadow of the past, he would never truly have the life he wanted. Barrett couldn't keep living in that paralyzing sense of helplessness that war had left behind. Every morning, as he woke up, he began to sense a shift within himself. Maybe it was Sarah's patience, her gentle reminders that to move forward, he needed to learn how to not let the pain of the past continue to control him. Sarah never pushed him to share too much, but she was always there, never judging, always ready to listen when he wanted to speak. Her presence, her sincerity, and her persistence helped him realize that nothing was insurmountable if he accepted help and didn't carry it all alone. Axel was also a key part of Barrett's awakening. Every day, the loyal German shepherd never left his side, always walking with him, always ready to protect him from outside dangers. But Axel wasn't just a companion in battle with enemies. Axel was the loyal friend who stood by him when the nightmares of war came flooding back, always there when Barrett felt loss and loneliness. There were moments when Barrett looked into Axel's eyes, and in that gaze, he saw a resilience he couldn't muster. Axel didn't carry the emotional scars that Barrett did, but the dog understood that sometimes, just being there, in silence, was enough to help his friend feel steadier. Axel didn't need to speak, just to be there, and that alone made Barrett feel less alone. But Barrett also realized that he couldn't keep relying on the support of others forever. He had to find a reason to live on his own, a purpose he had lost during the years of war. He needed to face his past, not to forget it, but to learn how to live with it without letting it control every remaining part of his life. Cedar Ridge might be a peaceful place, but for Barrett, that peace didn't come easily. He had to find it within himself. He had to learn to open up and accept what had happened. And in that process, he knew that peace didn't come from running away from painful memories, but from facing them and moving forward. Every time he faced those memories, he felt a part of him slowly changing. The memories no longer felt like an insurmountable burden, but became a part of the learning and growing process. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change how he faced it. Cedar Ridge, the familiar streets, the lush gardens, all of it became a part of a life he had to learn to embrace. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a man trying to find himself again. That feeling was still faint, like a weak light in the darkness, but it was strong enough for Barrett to start believing that he could keep living, not in the shadow of the past, but in a life full of hope. This awakening didn't just come from protecting the town. It came from protecting himself. He no longer wanted to live a life dominated by memories. Barrett felt a change within himself, but just as he was beginning to believe in his newfound strength, a new threat emerged in Cedar Ridge. A group of armed criminals, bigger and more vicious than before, had suddenly infiltrated the town. These attackers weren't just there to steal, they were there to terrorize the minds of the people. They launched relentless, brutal attacks, throwing the townspeople into chaos. Barrett heard the alarm sound from the town center, followed by gunfire growing louder, closer with each passing second. Instinctively, he rushed out of the house, gripping the gun he had always kept by his side. Axel stood right beside him, his eyes sharp, as if understanding that this wasn't just a battle to protect innocent people, but a fight he had to face within himself. This time Barrett felt the difference. This wasn't just a simple fight with an enemy. It was a battle inside him that he had to confront. He knew he had learned to face the past, but the memories still lingered, ghosts that weren't easy to shake off. Yet this time, he didn't feel fear. He stood tall, not just to protect Cedar Ridge, but for himself, for the people he loved, and for everything that was left in his life. As he and Axel rushed into the town center, the criminals were storming through, attacking families who were trying to find refuge. Without hesitation, Barrett aimed at one man holding a gun pointed at the civilians, and before he could react, a bullet pierced his chest. Everything happened in an instant, but in each action Barrett felt something awakening inside him. Each step, each bullet fired, not only helped him protect the town, but also helped him stand firm in his own life. Axel was just as swift, charging into the fight with an unstoppable courage. A criminal holding a knife charged from behind to attack Barrett, but Axel leapt in, biting down hard on the man's arm, forcing him to fall. Barrett couldn't help but feel a rush of pride, not just for winning the battle, but for Axel, the loyal companion who had always been by his side, ready to fight not just for the town's safety, but for his own too. Though the criminals this time weren't the deadliest enemies Barrett had faced, what mattered was that he recognized the change in himself. Each time he confronted the attackers, he no longer felt haunted by the memories of war. He could act with a clear purpose, to protect those he loved and to safeguard what was important to him. He no longer lived in the shadow of the past. He was living for the present and the future. When the battle ended and the criminals were captured, Barrett stood still for a moment, surveying the town. People were starting to return to their normal lives. A sense of peace began to spread, but Barrett no longer felt alone. Axel still stood by his side, eyes bright as if understanding that this battle wasn't just about protecting the town, but about protecting himself. Barrett couldn't help but smile. For the first time, he felt truly alive, not in the brutal memories, but in the present, in the things he had protected, and in the people he loved. Barrett had been searching for peace, but he had never truly felt like he could come alive again. Every time he looked to the past, the painful memories of war flooded back, pulling him into the darkness. However, after this battle with the criminals, as he stood protecting the town, something inside him had changed. This wasn't just a fight to protect others, it was a fight to protect himself. Barrett realized that recovery wasn't just about confronting the past. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change the way he viewed life. The war memories couldn't be erased, but he could learn to live with them, without letting them control his life. He had once lived like a ghost, trapped in the shadow of the past. But now he knew. That peace didn't come from forgetting the past, but from facing it, accepting it, and learning how to live for what was left. He no longer wanted to live trapped in the past. He began to understand that only by living for the present and the future could he truly find peace. The guilt, the helplessness, had followed him for so long, but now when facing new challenges and those he loved, he knew that change was necessary. He had to fight, not just to protect the town, but to protect the person inside him. The most important thing Barrett realized on this journey was the importance of not backing down, not turning back. Healing wouldn't come immediately, but with each step he took, each time he faced the painful memories, he gradually saw a new version of himself. He began to realize that the past would always be there, but it no longer had to define him. He wasn't the soldier in the war anymore. He was a man learning how to live fully, imperfectly, but moving forward with confidence and hope. When Barrett looked at Sarah and Axel, he felt warmth in his heart. It wasn't because they were standing by him in a battle, but because they were there, building a future with him. Though his wounds hadn't fully healed, their presence made him feel like he wasn't alone. He no longer had to fight by himself. Their support was the drive that pushed him forward, the reason to keep living, not because of the past, but because of what he could build in the future. Barrett looked back at the difficult days he had gone through, the sleepless nights, the nightmares, and the war memories that couldn't be erased. But now he was ready to move on. He wouldn't let the past control him anymore. He wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past, nor let the pain and guilt drag him down. He stood up, stronger than ever before. This wasn't just a battle to protect Cedar Ridge anymore. Barrett felt the weight on his chest, the mental scars still unhealed. But this time, he wasn't afraid. With Sarah's help, Barrett had started learning how to open up, though it wasn't always easy to confront the memories. But now he realized that in order to move forward, he couldn't keep hiding the pain. He had to share what he had been through, not to seek forgiveness, but to find healing for himself. On quiet afternoons, when the only sounds were the soft breeze rustling through the trees and Sarah's gentle footsteps, Barrett began to try telling her about his past. The memories of war, the painful decisions he had to make, the friends he had lost, all began to surface. Each story, no matter how painful, felt like a step closer to the truth he had hidden for so many years. Sarah didn't pressure Barrett to tell it all at once. She was patient, just listening, allowing Barrett to feel that she wasn't there to judge, but to understand and share. She didn't rush to give advice or comfort. She was just there, by his side, in silence. It was her presence that made Barrett feel safer. He didn't have to face these memories alone anymore. But even though Barrett had started to open up, he couldn't escape the feeling of guilt. What had happened in the past wouldn't let him go easily. The decisions he had made on the battlefield still cut deep within him. The comrades who had sacrificed their lives, those he couldn't save. Barrett couldn't forgive himself for the comrades he couldn't save. The faces of the fallen, their final moments, haunted him every day. He felt responsible, a soldier who failed to protect those he loved. Sarah noticed this. Though their bond had grown stronger, she knew the wounds within Barrett ran deep. Every time he revisited the past, she could see the pain in his eyes, even when he didn't speak it. But Sarah didn't rush him. She understood that healing wouldn't happen overnight. She couldn't force him to forget the past. She could only patiently walk beside him on this journey. Barrett felt a change happening within him. Every time he opened up, even just a little, he felt a bit lighter. But he knew. There was still a long road ahead. The wounds wouldn't heal instantly. The painful memories would always be there. But for the first time in years, Barrett felt like he could walk a little more steadily, even though sometimes the feelings of helplessness and guilt still lingered. Sarah and Barrett grew closer. Their relationship was no longer just about support. Sarah had become an essential part of Barrett's life. She was someone he could trust, the only one he could share his pain with, without feeling judged. Though there were still many unhealed wounds, Barrett knew Sarah would be there, helping him keep moving forward. Barrett began to realize that in order to heal, he couldn't keep living in the past. He had to learn to face those memories so they wouldn't control his life anymore. He couldn't continue holding everything inside. He couldn't live with the pain alone. That was the battle he had to face every day, not with the enemies outside, but with the memories inside. Sarah noticed the small changes in Barrett. She knew that every time he shared, even just a little, he was one step closer to healing. She didn't push him to open up right away, but her patience was the key to helping him slowly unlock his heart. Sarah understood that the scars inside Barrett weren't something that could heal quickly. The memories of war, of comrades lost, the difficult decisions he had to make in life and death moments, all left deep marks on his soul. Those wounds couldn't heal in a day, and she knew it would take time and patience. Even though Barrett still felt he had a long way to go to fully heal, he also began to understand that recovery wasn't a destination, but a process. Each step, every time he faced painful memories without turning back, was a small victory. He had learned to accept that this process couldn't be rushed, and the wounds wouldn't heal right away. But once he faced them, slowly, They wouldn't hold him back anymore. Sarah never stopped encouraging him. She was always there, ready to listen, without judgment, without pushing. When Barrett first shared a memory from the war, he didn't know how to say it all. His words caught in his throat, but Sarah didn't rush for a reply. She just quietly sat by him, her eyes full of patience and understanding. And eventually Barrett was able to share a piece of what he had carried all these years. That was an important step, not just in his journey but in his relationship with Sarah. Every time Barrett opened up, a part of him became lighter. Though the memories still haunted him, he realized that keeping them inside wouldn't help him move forward. Facing them, however, was the beginning of healing. But now, Barrett understood that healing wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. Sometimes he still felt weary. Sometimes the memories returned, and he couldn't stop thinking about them. But each time they did, he didn't collapse under their weight. He had learned to face them, to accept them, and most importantly, to live alongside them. The process of recovery wasn't a linear path. There were good days and bad days, but each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. And with each step, Barrett began to realize that it wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about making peace with it, living with it without letting it control him. Every conversation with Sarah, every moment when he shared just a piece of his pain, brought him closer to understanding that he didn't have to carry it all alone. Her patience, her unwavering presence, showed him that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about moving forward, accepting the broken parts of himself, and still finding joy in the present. Axel, the ever-loyal German shepherd, was his constant companion through it all. There were no words exchanged, but the bond between them was stronger than any conversation. Axel had always been there, in the heat of battle, and in the stillness of the night. Barrett knew that without Axel, this journey would have been even harder. The dog didn't judge, didn't ask for anything, just stood by him, offering silent comfort and unwavering loyalty. Each day Barrett woke up, he felt a little less burdened. The memories of war were still there, but they didn't have the same power over him anymore. He started to find peace in small moments, the sunlight spilling through his window, the soft sound of footsteps as he walked alongside Sarah and Axel, the simple comfort of knowing that he wasn't alone anymore. Those small moments, once overshadowed by the weight of his past, were now filling the spaces in his heart that had once felt so empty. For the first time in years, Barrett didn't feel like a prisoner of his own mind. The past, with all its pain, no longer ruled him. He still had a long road ahead, but every day he learned more about the man he could be, not the man defined by his past, but by his choices moving forward. He had the strength to face whatever came his way, not because he was invincible, but because he had learned to accept that vulnerability was part of being human and that sharing his pain didn't make him weak. With Sarah by his side and Axel's constant, silent support, Barrett knew that recovery wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one that would take time, patience, and love. But it was a journey he didn't have to walk alone. Barrett knew he couldn't keep running. Instead of retreating, he understood he had to keep moving forward. He realized that healing wasn't about perfection, but about taking small steps, making small decisions, and appreciating the little moments that make up everyday life. He had begun learning to accept that he couldn't change everything, but he could change how he saw it and how he lived with it. Most importantly, Barrett understood that healing didn't only come from within. It also came from the people around him. Sarah, Axel, and Cedar Ridge had shown him that he didn't have to live in solitude or pain. They were an essential part of his journey. Whenever he felt weak, Sarah was there, reminding him that he didn't have to face everything alone. She wasn't just a listener. She was a source of strength, helping him find faith in himself. Barrett felt a shift in himself. Though his wound still hadn't fully healed, he had crossed a threshold. He no longer feared his past. He began seeing it as part of who he was, a part that had helped him grow. Even though the road ahead was still filled with challenges, Barrett no longer felt alone. He looked at the wounds in his soul, each painful memory, each inner battle, as part of a past he couldn't erase. But through this journey, Barrett slowly realized that healing didn't come from avoiding the past, but from confronting it. He couldn't live in the shadow of war and its painful memories. He had to learn to live with those scars, accept them, and keep moving forward. The memories no longer felt like an insurmountable burden. Barrett understood that, even though they would always be there, he could control how he reacted to them. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with what had happened without letting it dictate the present. The guilt and helplessness that once consumed him no longer controlled his every thought. Instead, he started to see that every day was a chance to move closer to freedom and peace in his heart. When Barrett faced his past, he no longer felt afraid. The wounds wouldn't heal instantly, but each time he confronted them, he felt stronger. Every conversation with Sarah, every night he shared a piece of his painful past, was a step forward in his healing journey. Sarah's encouragement, patience, and presence helped Barrett realize he didn't have to carry it all alone. And Axel, his loyal dog, was always there by his side, the first to recognize the changes in him. Every morning, when Barrett woke up, the heaviness that once gripped him wasn't as strong. The memories were still there, but he no longer felt suffocated by them. He began to find peace in small things, like the sunlight streaming into his home, or walking with Sarah and Axel. Simple moments like these began to fill the emptiness inside him. The painful memories were no longer the only things occupying his mind. He began to see the value in his relationships and the present moments. Barrett also realized that healing wouldn't always happen instantly. There were times when he still felt tired, when memories resurfaced, and he couldn't stop thinking about them. But instead of stepping back, Barrett knew he had to keep moving forward. He understood that it wouldn't always be perfect, but each day he was one step closer to healing. Barrett knew that this was his moment, a chance to truly stand firm, not just for Cedar Ridge, but for everything he'd been fighting for: his own peace, his healing, his future. Axel was by his side, as always, unwavering and ready. The bond between them, built over years of shared struggles, was unbreakable. As the sound of gunfire rang in the distance, Barrett's grip on his weapon tightened, his heart steady. His muscles, once tense with fear and uncertainty, now moved with purpose. The town, once peaceful and quiet, was now caught in chaos. But Barrett wasn't the same man who had first arrived in Cedar Ridge. The fear of the past, the weight of the pain, it no longer ruled him. He was no longer running away from what he had endured. Now he was confronting it. Each step he took, moving toward the threat, was an affirmation that he had the power to choose his path, to decide who he would be. And this fight was his to win. The enemy was relentless. They pushed forward with weapons drawn, their intention clear: to break what had been built here, to shatter the fragile peace that Cedar Ridge had enjoyed for so long. But Barrett wasn't backing down. This was not a battle he could walk away from. He wasn't just fighting for the town. He was fighting for everything he'd almost lost: his sense of self, his redemption, and his future. He was not alone. Sarah's voice, strong and calm, echoed in his mind, as she had always been there for him, a steady presence. Axel, too, remained steadfast, ever the loyal companion, his eyes focused on the path ahead. They had fought together before, and now they would fight side by side once more. With each heartbeat, with each step toward the danger, Barrett found strength he didn't know he had. The past couldn't break him anymore. It had tried, but now it was his turn to move forward, to protect those he cared for, and to prove that no matter how broken he felt, he could rise again. The battle raged on, and though the odds were stacked against them, Barrett felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The sight of his town, of his people fighting back, and of Sarah and Axel standing strong beside him reminded him of everything worth fighting for. This wasn't just about survival. It was about living. Truly living, in the present, with all its struggles and victories. As the fight continued, Barrett knew that healing wasn't an end goal. It was a journey, one filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of peace. But it was a journey worth taking. He wasn't alone anymore. Barrett feels the weight of his past, but he knows he can't keep running from it. He has to face what's ahead, not just for the ones he loves, but for himself, so those old memories don't drag him back into the shadows. This time, the attackers aren't just petty thieves. They're a real threat. Barrett realizes that even though he's healed some, he's not yet ready for something like this. But for the first time, he feels the strength to stand up. To stand up not just for Cedar Ridge, but for himself. He can't live in fear, chained to the past, any longer. This is the moment he faces his biggest challenge yet. Not just fighting for others, but for his own recovery and future. As he looks at Axel, the unwavering loyalty in the dog's eyes gives him courage. Even with the town under attack, with danger closing in, Barrett knows he can't back down. This is more than a fight to protect Cedar Ridge. It's a fight to reclaim his life from the past. The battle isn't just against the criminals, it's against the war memories that have haunted him for years. Every step into this fight brings the echoes of the battlefield, fallen comrades, gunshots, bombs, and decisions he can't undo. Those memories are part of him, inescapable, but this time, they won't stop him. He won't let the mistakes of the past repeat. He'll fight for those he loves, and most importantly, for himself. As he steps out of the shadows of his house, the dim streetlights casting a faint glow, Barrett feels reborn. This isn't just any battle. Every step, every confrontation with these criminals is more than about defending the town. It's about breaking free from the control of his past. Those painful memories are flooding back, decisions he couldn't change, lives lost that he couldn't save. But instead of retreating, he feels a new strength surge through him. He knows in order to move forward, he can't keep running. He has to face it and take charge. Axel charges ahead, fierce and unstoppable. The dog lunges into the fray, biting into one of the attacker's arms, sending him crashing to the ground. Barrett reacts instantly, no hesitation. He's not just fighting these criminals, he's fighting to protect what he's rebuilt after the war. Gunfire cracks through the air, but Barrett stands firm. He's learned how to keep fear from controlling his actions. No matter what his past holds, he must keep moving forward, keep fighting. Each criminal he takes down, every person he protects, Barrett feels himself heal a little more. This isn't just a fight between life and death. It's a battle between hope and the darkness inside him. He knows he won't always win, but at least he's fighting for something he believes in. Every bullet fired, every punch, every labored breath in this fight is a testament to his strength. The guilt that's haunted him for so long is no longer the burden it once was. With each step down this path, each decision he makes, he's not just defending Cedar Ridge. He's making a promise to himself that he won't let the past control him. He will stand firm, not just for the ones he loves, but for his own sake. When the last of the criminals were taken down and the town of Cedar Ridge returned to its quiet peace, Barrett paused for a moment, surveying his surroundings. He realized that this battle wasn't just about protecting the ones he loved. It was about finding himself again. The wounds in his heart weren't healed, but for the first time, he felt they no longer controlled him. He had won, not because he had defeated the enemy, but because he refused to let the past repeat itself. He turned back to look at Sarah, standing in the shadows, her eyes full of concern, yet also pride. Barrett knew, too, that this wasn't just any fight. This was the final battle, not only against external enemies, but against himself. The memories of war, the painful decisions, the lost comrades still haunted him. The long nights without sleep, the nightmares, all of it clung to him, never letting go. And though Cedar Ridge was once again under threat, facing a new danger, Barrett realized what he was truly facing was the awakening within him. He wasn't just fighting for the ones he loved, he was fighting to reclaim a part of himself that he had lost. The guilt still lingered, like a shadow he couldn't shake. Even though he had risen to fight, to protect the town, his family, his friends, in his mind, every gunshot, every battle, reminded him of painful memories. The fallen comrades, the unavoidable deaths, the decisions he knew he couldn't change. He once thought war was the thing that haunted him, but now he understood that those memories themselves were the true enemy. He couldn't forget what had happened, but he could learn to live with it. Barrett realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but accepting it as part of who he was. While the memories of war couldn't be erased, they no longer controlled his life. He wasn't afraid to think about them anymore. Instead, Barrett began to learn how to coexist with those memories without letting them dominate his life. He knew that, to move forward, he had to master those memories, not let them imprison him in despair. Looking at the people he had protected, the citizens of Cedar Ridge, Barrett realized that this battle wasn't just about defending them, it was a declaration that he could live a new life. A life not controlled by painful memories, not dominated by the scars left by war. He wasn't the soldier he once was. He was a man searching for peace, learning how to open his heart and accept himself. Barrett turned back to face the challenge, no longer filled with fear or a sense of helplessness. He had realized that no matter how brutal his past had been, he couldn't let it continue to cast its shadow over him. He wouldn't let it dictate his life. Standing tall, he looked at the remaining enemies and made a firm decision. He would fight, not just for Cedar Ridge, but for himself. He would fight to reclaim life, to reclaim the part of himself he had lost. This fight wouldn't just be about protecting the safety of Cedar Ridge. It would be about protecting his heart, deciding to live in freedom instead of fear and pain. Every step Barrett took wasn't just about facing the enemy outside, it was about facing himself. He no longer sought forgiveness, he was seeking freedom. He knew that, though the road ahead would be full of challenges, he would never retreat. He had learned how to live with the scars, but he wouldn't let them control his life. Barrett stood still, looking over the town under threat, watching as innocent people were attacked. In that moment, he didn't feel weak or scared. Instead, he felt stronger than ever. Strong not just because of the people he was protecting, but because of himself. This fight wasn't just to stop the enemy's attack. It was his chance to prove that he could stand up again, protect what mattered, and most importantly, build a new life for himself. When the battle finally ended and peace slowly began to return, Barrett felt as if he had passed a pivotal point in his life. The guilt, the painful memories were still there, but they no longer had a grip on him. Cedar Ridge was safe, but more importantly, he had proven to himself that he could continue to live, despite the past always being a part of him. After the battle, the town fell back into its usual rhythm. But inside Barrett's mind, something had shifted. He no longer felt like a soldier locked in an endless fight. The memories of war no longer weighed him down the way they once did. Instead, he felt like he could live a new life, a life not shadowed by the past, but focused on the present, on what mattered now, the people he loved, and most of all, himself. Barrett realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. The past would always be there, a part of who he was, a part of the experiences he'd gone through. But true healing came from learning to accept those memories, live with them, and not let them control his life. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change how he saw it, how he responded to it. Each day that passed, Barrett learned to no longer let the wounds in his heart rule his life. He didn't try to avoid them or erase them. Instead, he learned to face them and find strength in the very things that had hurt him. The town, Sarah, and Axel, those were the reasons he kept moving forward. Especially Axel, his loyal companion who stood by him, not just in battle, but on this journey of healing. Looking back on his past, Barrett no longer felt fear or guilt. The memories of war no longer weighed as heavily on him. He had begun to understand that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about acceptance. He had to learn to live with it without letting it determine his future. And he also realized that throughout this process, he had never been alone. Sarah had always been there, quietly beside him. Every time they met, every time Barrett shared with her even the smallest part of his memories, she never judged him. She just listened, patiently. Her love and care had helped Barrett understand that recovery wasn't a solitary journey. She was the one who helped him realize that he didn't have to carry these wounds by himself. Barrett turned his gaze back to Cedar Ridge. This little town, though small, had become his second home. Every house, every street, every person in the town held a piece of meaning in his life. He wasn't just protecting the town. He was protecting himself. Cedar Ridge had taught him that life wasn't just about surviving the trials, but about living for the things that mattered, for the relationships and love he had found. Barrett had never felt more fully alive, more whole than he did in this moment. The wounds in his heart weren't completely healed, but they no longer paralyzed him. He began to understand that recovery wasn't a destination. It was a continuous journey. And each day, he grew closer to the peace within his soul, a peace not found in erasing the past, but in learning to live with it, face it, and still move forward. Standing by the riverbank, Barrett gazed into the distance, where the sunlight shimmered on the water. For the first time, he saw his future clearly. A future that wasn't defined by the past, but by him, the man who had learned to stand tall, accept, and love himself. The soft reminder that life goes on, no matter what the past may have brought. He could feel the peace slowly filling his heart. The wounds inside him were still there, not yet fully healed, but they no longer controlled his life. Barrett had learned to live with the memories of war, but now those memories were no longer burdens. They were simply part of what had been, a part of his growth and quest for freedom. He knew he would never be perfect, but he also understood that peace doesn't come from avoiding the past. It comes from accepting it, facing it, and continuing to walk forward. Turning back to look at Cedar Ridge, where peaceful streets and warm homes awaited his return, Barrett saw the town not only as something to protect, but as a place where he found safety, a peace he'd long searched for. And even though the town might face new challenges, he knew that Sarah and Axel would always be by his side, the two most important companions on this journey. Sarah stood there, quietly watching him from a distance. She had always been patient with him, never forcing him to share, never judging, just being there, ready to support and share in his journey. Every time Barrett looked into her eyes, he felt the understanding and love she had for him. She wasn't just a friend. She was the one who helped him realize that life could move forward, no matter how painful the past had been. She had helped him open up, helped him find himself again. Axel, Barrett's loyal companion, stood beside him, eyes focused, as if assuring him that he would never have to walk alone again. The German Shepherd wasn't just a partner in battle, but a symbol of unwavering loyalty. Axel had been with him through countless struggles, and in that moment, Barrett could feel the warmth of that genuine friendship. Axel was the reason Barrett fought, the reason he wouldn't give up, the reason he understood that nothing was more precious than friendship and loyalty. Barrett took a deep breath, savoring the fresh, quiet air of the evening. He no longer felt the weight in his chest, no longer felt the past controlling him. Each breath, each step brought the freedom he had longed for. He knew nothing could change the past, but he also understood that he could change how he viewed life and move forward. This chapter closed with a feeling of fulfillment. The bond between Barrett and Sarah had grown stronger, and together with Axel, they had created a small family where love and loyalty were the foundation. Barrett was no longer the soldier he once was, but a man who had found peace in life. Cedar Ridge was not just a town he protected, it was where he found family, where he could live a new life, no longer shackled by the past. From now on, Barrett would continue on his journey forward, with Sarah and Axel by his side, their love and loyalty fueling his every step. The painful memories of war no longer dominated him. He had learned to live with them, but now they were no longer burdens. They were part of him, part of his journey toward growth and freedom. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change how he faced it, refusing to let it dictate his every decision and step. Each morning, Barrett felt a clearer sense of peace within himself. He was no longer haunted by the war's nightmares, nor was he living with the guilt and helplessness that had weighed him down for so long. He had found a part of himself in the love and loyalty that Sarah and Axel had brought into his life. His wounds weren't things that would heal overnight, but they no longer stopped him from moving forward. The scars on his soul were now proof of his strength and resilience. Barrett wasn't just fighting to protect Cedar Ridge, he was fighting to protect himself. His recovery didn't come from forgetting the past. The past would always be there, a part of him, a part of the experiences he had lived through. But true healing came from learning to accept it and live with those memories, not letting them control his life. He couldn't change what happened, but he could change how he viewed and responded to it. When Barrett looked at Sarah, his heart swelled with emotions he had long tried to avoid. Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was the one who had stood by him through countless hardships. In his darkest moments, she had helped him find the light. Every time Sarah stood by Barrett, just a look from her was enough for him to feel her warmth and genuine love, without needing any words. There was something in Sarah's eyes that made him feel a deep connection, not just friendship, but something much more profound. Their relationship had evolved. Each time they shared a quiet moment together, Barrett felt his feelings slowly shifting. Sarah was no longer just his support through recovery. She was becoming a vital part of his life. He had learned to open up to her, not only because she was a devoted listener, but because he realized that love and loyalty weren't distant ideals. They were real values that could bring true healing. Barrett stood amidst the challenges, the old memories, and the new battles. But this time, he didn't feel alone. He had Sarah, someone who wasn't just a companion, but someone who made him reflect on who he was. Their bond had grown deeper, not just through support, but through genuine affection and understanding. Sarah didn't need to speak. In every glance, every thoughtful gesture, Barrett felt a love blossoming between them, a love he had tried not to acknowledge, but one he couldn't deny anymore. Axel remained an indispensable part of Barrett's journey. The dog had fought beside him, protected him, and, more importantly, Axel represented an unwavering loyalty. Axel was the companion who kept Barrett from feeling lost. The dog had helped him realize that love and loyalty didn't just come from humans, but from true friends, beings who could help fight life's battles with us. This chapter closes Barrett's story, but it also opens up a new beginning. He is no longer a soldier haunted by war, but a man who has found peace through love and loyalty. Not just for those he loves, but for himself too. Barrett has realized that life holds many other values beyond painful memories. He no longer feels controlled by his past, and though challenges still lie ahead, he is ready to face them. Each step he takes is not only to protect the town, but also to protect the person he has rediscovered within himself. If you're searching for a reason to keep going, remember that healing doesn't come from avoiding difficulties, but from confronting them and learning to live stronger with each fall. Be brave and keep moving forward, just like Barrett. You too can find peace within yourself. Every day is an opportunity to rise up and live stronger. Life will always present challenges, but the most important thing is that you're never alone on that journey.